days when I ignorantly denied your holy days, following pagan ways. Once I was blind, but now I see. I am free, no longer in sin, and reborn again. And I'll never return to when I was unlearned, only for
blessed to inherit the earth. I need that temperance to keep my mind right. Diligence to keep me in the fight. Virtue, knowledge, yeah, that's right. And charity too. It covers a multitude of sins. What? I need it. Give me you, give me you, give me you. I need you, I need you. Give me you, give me you, give me you. 'Cause I need you, I need you. More than the water that I drink, more than the air that I breathe. Give me you, give me you, give me you. 'Cause I need you, I need you. I need you. My King and my Savior.
Mamleket Kohanim, Kingdom of Priests, Culture, and Heritage Preservation, to preserve, support, and promote the culture, history, and heritage of African every people scattered worldwide throughout the diaspora. Objective is to raise awareness and support to assist those who descend from the ancient African every groups, scattered throughout the globe with their desire to learn more about their history. The organization's efforts will be to connect with others of this heritage, scattered through the world through education, research, networking, media, and charitable efforts. Exodus chapter 19, verse 5 through 6, King James Version. Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and there shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, Mamleket, Kohanim, and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 through 10, NISB 95. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. For you once were not a people, but now you are the people of God. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Here are our customs. We turn towards Jerusalem when praying. 2 Chronicles chapter 6, verse 38 through 39 says, If they return to you with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their captivity, where they have been taken captive, and pray toward their land, which you have given to their fathers, in the city which you have chosen, and toward the house which I have built for your name. Then hear from heaven, from the dwelling place, their prayer and supplications, and maintain their cause, and forgive your people who have sinned against you. We blow the shofar, or trumpet every feast day and Shabbat. Numbers chapter 10, verse 2. Make yourself 2 trumpets of silver, of hammered work you shall make them, and you shall use them for summoning the congregation, and for having the camps set out. When both are blown, all the congregation shall gather themselves to you at the doorway of the tent of meeting. Here are some of the every Hebrew words we use. If you are interested in merchandise, please visit our website at https://mamleketkohanim.org. Please read if you are interested in becoming a monthly member, giving a donation, or becoming a volunteer. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Praise Yah. We thank Yah for this set apart day that He set apart from the very beginning. And we're Memleket Kohanim, the kingdom of priests, here to worship together with all those who came across the four corners to give Him praise. We honor Him and thank Him for each and every day of life, of health, of breath in our lungs, and all the wonderful things that He's doing in our lives. So thank you all for joining us today as well. Shabbat Shalom, Ms. Rosemary and Ak Nathan, thank you for coming. Shabbat Shalom P and B, I would say, not throw your name out there. So thank you both for coming as well. So Yah is just going to be doing some great things, and we're going to be talking about the king. So I thought to always connect what we're talking about as much as we can to prophecy and why it matters today. So Zechariah 14 is a scripture, and it says, "Behold, a day is coming for Yahuwah when the spoil taken from you will be divided among you. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, and half the city exiled. But the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then Yahuwah will go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fights on a day of battle. In that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives will be split in its middle from east to west by a very large valley, so that half the mountain will move toward the north, and the other half toward the south. You will flee by the valley of my mountain, for the valley of the mountains will reach Azel. Yes, you will flee just as you fled before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then Yahuwah Ma'el will come, and all the holy ones with him. In that day there will be no light, the luminaries will dwindle, for it will be a unique day which is known to Yahuwah, neither day nor night, but it will come about that at evening time there will be light, and in the day living waters will flow out of Jerusalem, half of them toward the eastern sea, and the other half towards the western sea. It will be in summer as well as in winter. And Yahuwah will be king over all the earth in that day. Yahuwah will be the only one, and his name will be the only one. All the land will be changed into a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. But Jerusalem will rise and remain on its site from Benjamin's gate as far as the place of the first gate of the corner gate, and from the tower of Hanel to the king's winepress. People will live in it, and there will no longer be a curse for Jerusalem will dwell in security." Hallelujah. Praise Yah. So we can see that he still wants to be king over us, and in the last days he will be king. So let's give him praise. So let me blow the shofar. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Let us pray. Turn towards Jerusalem. Dear Yah, we thank you for gathering us together today to give you praise. We thank you for all the things you're doing for us. We ask you to forgive us of our sins. Forgive us of our ancestors' sins. Forgive our children, our descendants' sins. Help us to live holy and righteous before you, and learn from the sins of our fathers and not try to do the same thing that they did and had allowed their wicked heart or their own heart of selfishness to lead them astray. So help us to get aligned with you. Help our hearts to get aligned with you, so our families and our futures can be aligned with you as well, as you have prophesied in your word. We just thank you for giving us this time and this day to come before you and to have this moment with you. So to recognize you and to glorify you. So we thank you for all those who are able to join and giving us the strength and health and the knowledge and whatever wisdom you so desire to give us to lead our people in a way that you so choose. We ask you to be with us as part of this service. Help it bring glory unto your name and pleasure as well. We love you and we praise you to your son's Yahushua HaMashiach's name. We do pray. Hallelujah. Amen. So we're going to have a song from my Isha.
You better mind, children. You better mind, oh my word. You got to give an account at the judgment. You better mind, mind, mind. You better mind how you talk. You better mind what you're talking about. You got to give an account at the judgment. You better mind, mind, mind. You better mind how you walk. You better mind where you're walking at. You got to give an account at the judgment. You better mind, mind, mind. You better mind, children. You better mind, oh my word. You got to give an account at the judgment. You better mind, mind, mind. You better mind, children. You better mind, oh my word. You got to give an account at the judgment. You better mind, mind, mind.
We're all going to have to give an account, so praise Yah. All right. So next, oh yeah. So this was the video that we put out yesterday. Of course, it's an old video from way back, a year or two ago, maybe a year ago. But it continues on the same building foundation of, our people who left from here in Chicago and went over to Liberia and then went to Dimona. And then it talks about how there was two different groups that's over there now that split from there. So there's actually two groups. A lot of people just talk about the one, Dimona, but there's actually a second one too there. So it's important to understand there's so much things that was talked about us and around us, but to hear about what happened there, at least from one side, and then also, compare it to what we hear today, and to get like a full story, because a lot of times people try to group everyone together, try to lump us together, try to say we all are cults and stuff, and there's always truth to everything. As we even see in Christianity, a lot of times people don't talk about the beginning, a lot of the stuff during Catholicism, right, that happened during that time. So how do they basically cover up the fact that they killed so many people, put us in slavery, killed Native Americans, all this crusades, all that actually transpired through Catholicism, and then later on even through the Protestants, and how they had, Southern Baptists had slaves, and all the things that had actually transpired through all that time. And it's like, oh, forget about that. We're just going to talk about stuff going forward, but then say, oh, this group right here is a terrible group, So it wasn't just Christians, but even Muslims, right? They had a lot of part to do with what's going on that happened in Africa with our people and slavery as well. So if we want to, look across all the groups, even, Judaism, even Jews had slaves here in America, was part of that too, as you heard the Jewish reporter talk about it a couple of weeks ago, right? He even talked about how there wasn't more, he said, more slavery done by Jews than Europeans, but he said equal amount. So we need to make sure we understand the true story behind everything else, and where we are now, there's always different sides of the story. Also, we know that even I talk about even with Greeks and frats and sororities, right? Those are worship to other gods. Those are connections to other gods. I know sometimes people feel like just because you're not bowed down before an altar or before a statue, that shouldn't be considered worship. But your association to certain deities, that's also when you actually admonish them or hold them higher, sometimes even higher than Yah. If you're wearing the clothes and association, shows you that you have a strong connection to those things, that those icons and those type of things as well. So there's a way that you honor them, singing songs to them, right? So we know that a lot of those pledge songs and those sororities and fraternity songs are in reference to those groups, and those groups all have association with a deity, and it's not Yah. So there's issues in all groups. I'm trying to say, so how do we come out of that now that we have went through this series of issues? Every time we start something, we get caught up other than getting our hearts right. So that's what this video is trying to lead, is what I've been trying to show previous weeks. So next slide. So that's, when we talked about the Ben-Ammi, and, even though they had a good vision of what trying to go on back to Israel and try to be the people, how some of the things there, actually impacted them. I actually saw one of the people there that I'm aware of. He put out a thing about Ben-Ammi to honor him, and then people were still calling him Father, Abba. So there's still some remnants of that, and we're interested in understanding more about that. So maybe I can get somebody from that community to tell their story from their side as well, and that way we get a complete story of not only what happened in the past, because everyone has ability to change, and even us as a people. I was caught up in a lot of the Christian things around Christmas, and a lot of us are coming out of those things, and some of us are still in it, and we're trying to understand. But this is the time I feel like Yah is pulling us out of all those things once again to give him praise and to bring us back together as a people. So, we can see how it started off right, but then, with a good intent, and then there was some stuff there that kind of led them astray as well. So next. And then we talk about even earlier, how they first started, and then, going to Liberia and some of the things that they actually went through to actually get to Israel. But you got to understand even what's the prophecies, right? How does the prophecy say that we're going to return to Israel? Is it going to be based upon our own strength, or is it going to be based upon what Yah does in his miracles? And that's the big issue. Sometimes we don't depend on Yah's miracles. We try to figure out things on our own. Now, in being in obedience, I feel like Yah is going to call certain people forth at the right time, but we got to discern who are those right people, right? Because he said that there will be coming many antichrists. Yahushua said that in the last days. So how do we know the people who's leading us in the right direction, or those that's, doing it for their own intent? For even some of the prophets were talking about there will be bad pastors or bad shepherds that's going to go forth that actually has an intent for money, right? For recognition for themselves, that's going to scatter the sheep even more. So we got to really have our understandings and our discernment on high alert, right? Because it says that many will be deceived and many people will fall astray in these days. And Yah is looking for a committed people whose heart is truly after him. So next. And then that's where we started, right? We started with the black Jews. So even that, right? Some people having alliances with other people, some decided to convert for halakha in order to be accepted. And is that right? Should we actually be looking for acceptance, or should we be looking for our acceptance through Yah, right? Is our alliance with trying to be connect to our culture and gain who we are from an ethnicity standpoint, or is our movement trying to realign ourselves as a people back to Yah and what he first established us to be? So these are the things we definitely got to look at, and hopefully these are the things that's helping us to at least see what happened historically, so we won't make the same mistakes. So it's not just our past fathers from a biblical sense that a lot of people like to talking about what all happened way back when, and they don't really like to talk about what's happening right now, right? How are people starting to get caught up in so many things like polygamy? You can see some of the damages that's happening there. You know, a lot of times people say, hey, they, you know, we're polygamous in the Bible, but they don't want to talk about the fact that Abraham married his half sister, right? Like, are you marrying half sisters now? So it shows you that Yah was basically preparing the people, that he's setting apart, right? We haven't become all fully set apart because we continue to get engaged with a lot of sin and a lot of things of the world that continues to pull us and separate us from Yah. But he has a desire to bring us back, and he's going to, you know, he says he's going to bring us back whether we like it or not, and then he's going to separate people. So, you know, are we connected and focused on him, or are we connected and focused on our own desires and what we want to do, right? And this is what I feel like the time that Yah is starting to separate a lot of that. He's showing people who's for themselves and who's for him, right? Even when it comes to religion and even the Israelite, right, awakening, some people still have their own concepts and the things that they want to do versus what Yah wants us to align with him. So these are the reason why these are mad. I know there's a lot of controversy as people like nowadays. They like a whole bunch of controversy and stuff like that. They don't really like, you know, hearing history and understanding the effects of a lot of stuff, but Yah has a plan, you know, and we have to understand what his plans is and not just our own desires. All right. So we're going to get into the Hebrew heritage fact, and Shabbat Shalom. My son's out there, Jay Shia, for real. So this is important, right, to understand who we are and what we're going and what is some of the history around it. So next slide. So this one, you know, fair use disclaimer. So I want to make sure people know about that. So next. So this is, again, is the history morsels. So this is a lot of the things that's connecting us back from slavery now into going into what happened, right? How do we know we came from the 12 tribes, and, you know, what evidence that's out there to help us to be stronger in our approach and our understanding, because the stronger that we become, the easier it is to share with others. So, you know, this is another video that I hope will help with that. Once again, I don't know who's behind this site. I'm starting to feel more like it's not Israelite. I'm seeing some evidence of some, but, you know, that even shows you people outside of our community who might not be African American is now sharing information for some reason for us to know. So why is this all happening? What's the motive behind it? Also, we got to be careful because there are some other groups that's talking about African Jewry or, you know, African Israelites, and they still have, you know, European dominance, right? And we're finding out, working with a lot of our partnerships that a lot of you are helping with for us to have by helping us financially and, you know, supporting us in that way, so we can basically have conversations with our Israelite relatives across the four corners in other countries. And some of the things that's being pushed out by a lot of people who are saying they're scholars and, you know, that have a different heritage than us, that they are basically, you know, misrepresenting us in some of these videos as well. So what is, you know, it's important for us to be able to share some of the stuff that we're seeing here and stuff that they're seeing, you know, especially even with us coming from slavery and African Americans, you know, a lot of different portrayal of us overseas is negative, right? They always see us as gang members, and, you know, if you scroll down to YouTube and just, you know, type in something like that, how do people perceive African Americans in Africa or something, right? In certain countries in Africa. And, you know, a lot of times they have a negative outlook on us, and, you know, sometimes they have positive, sometimes they have negative, depending upon, you know, our interaction with them. So that's why it's so important for us to make sure our conduct, as Peter says, our conduct among the Gentiles, right? We got to make sure that we do have good conduct among us so people can't talk negative about us, and it gives Yah glory. But in the same sense, you know, we got to understand what's going on in these other places, because they're trying to do the same thing from them to keep us separated. You know, Africa is a continent, right? So a lot of people are like, oh, I ain't African. I'm like, that's a continent. It's one of the largest, if not the largest continent, with so many diverse people and groups, and even, you know, DNA people say that, right? They say that Africa has some of the most different DNA within the people differences as well. So why do they have so many differences in DNA, right? We got to understand the differences between the different tribes and clans, and to see who do we connect to. Do we connect to every African? Of course not. There's certain ones that we connect to and certain ones we don't, right? And even in the Bible, there was Ham, Shem, and Japheth, right? A lot of people at least agree that Ham and Shem were black. So what's the difference between Ham and Shem? Ham was Egyptians, Ham was Cushites, right? So, us being Shem mixed with Ham, right? So even as we'll talk a little bit, which we already have, but we'll talk a little bit more about it today, how the Canaanites and the Israelites mixed. Even Judah had 2 Canaanite women he had children by. So, you know, the current day Jews should have some Canaanite within them, right? Afro-Asiatic, as we say, Hebrews are the language is Afro-Asiatic. And even some of our early rappers back in the day used to talk about the Afro-Asiatic people too. So this will give you a better understanding of what happened in some of the scattered tribes, and, you know, how they actually prove it by looking at some of the slave ship documentation too. So, all right.
What if I told you that right now, sitting inside a publicly accessible database, there are over 36,000 shipping records that accidentally prove one of the oldest prophecies in human history? Not interpreted, not symbolically, literally, geographically, name by name, port by port. I'm not talking about a religious claim. I'm talking about coordinates, ship logs, colonial cargo records that European governments themselves compiled over 400 years and never meant to be read the way we're about to read them today. Here's what most people don't know. Before Africa was carved up into countries we recognize today, before Ghana, Nigeria, Benin, Angola, that coastline had different names, names that appear in ancient texts, names tied to specific peoples, specific territories, specific bloodlines. And when historians began digitizing every single slave ship voyage ever recorded, they built something they called the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. 36,000 voyages, 12 million people, every port of departure logged, every port of arrival documented. What nobody expected is that when you lay those departure ports on top of ancient territorial maps from texts that predate European colonialism by over 1,000 years, the match is almost perfect. So today, we're not going to talk about just one group. We're going to talk about all 12. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to look at a map of West Africa and never see it the same way again. If you've been following this channel, you already know what we covered before. Portugal made contact with the West African coast in the 1400s, and what they found there, they didn't just trade with, they documented. Their own scribes, their own cartographers, their own clergy, they wrote down what the people called themselves. They wrote down what the land was called. They drew it on maps. One of those maps, and I've shown this in a previous video, labeled a coastal region of West Africa as Judah, sometimes spelled Jada, sometimes Ouida. The people living there were called by names that traced back to a Semitic-speaking culture. Now here's where the story got complicated. Over the next 3 centuries, a massive transformation happened in Europe. The identity of Israelite or Hebrew was slowly transferred, culturally, politically, theologically, to groups of people in Eastern Europe and the Middle East who had converted to those religious traditions centuries earlier. This is a documented historical process. Historians like Arthur Koestler wrote entire books about it. We are not here to argue that debate today. What we are here to do is ask a question that nobody seems to be asking. If Judah was on the West African coast, and we've established that, then what happened to the other 11 territories? Because here's what you need to understand about ancient Israelite civilization. It was never just one tribe. They were 12, and according to their own texts, each one had a specific geographic assignment, a specific land, a specific portion of the world. So if Judah was in West Africa, where was Benjamin? Where was Simeon? Where was Ephraim? That is the question we are answering today, and the answer comes not from a religious text, it comes from a colonial shipping database. Let me show you how this works. Here's something most Western Bible readers don't know.
So I think that's very important to understand, because a lot of times people try to be confused. They said, how are we going to come together as a people? How do you know if you not only come from Judah or Benjamin or what tribe? And I tell people a lot of times the tribes that know who they are in Africa, that know they're connected to Israel, they know what tribe that they're connected to, right? Some of them have not lost that history. Like the Gad tribe, right? They're Gad. They're the tribe of Gad. The Igbo tribe, at least the ones that a lot of people show on TV and interview, they say that they know exactly how they come through the Bible from the tribe of Gad. And then they said there's other people from other tribes of the 12 tribes that are Igbo that know how they descend. There's a video that talks a little bit about that. It's a little dry, so I didn't show it because I know sometimes it's hard to hold people's attention when it comes to stuff like that. But they actually know, right? The Da tribe, the Dan tribe. I talked about this. Yakoba. They say they come from Jacob. So the kingdom of Judah. It says it's Judah in its name. So, and even as we know, there's other tribes that actually migrated throughout Africa, like Simeon and so forth. So, this is, once again, is something that Yah is putting forth to connect us back, not only to our relatives across the four corners, but also to specific tribes, right? It's like it's him doing this connection back, and that's why we're doing the DNA test and stuff to show us, yourself, how you connect to one of these tribes. So it's so important that we, understand this, because he's going to talk about some of the stuff that even universities like Emory University, he's going to talk about, some of the stuff that they put together about connecting slaves. And, a lot of Europeans, they like to write. They used to write everything down. So they kept track of a lot of those things. So now he's going to use that along with, I want to say, well, I'll let him say it, but some of the scripture, some of the Ethiopian scriptures as well, and see how all that jives together. So pay attention to this part as well. Thank you.
The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has used a version of Scripture for over 1,700 years that includes texts not found in the standard Protestant or Catholic Bible. One of those texts is called the Book of Jubilees. It's also sometimes called the Little Genesis. The Book of Jubilees is not a fringe document. It was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. It is considered one of the most important surviving texts of Second Temple Judaism. Scholars date its composition to somewhere between the 3rd and 1st century BCE, making it older than most of the New Testament. And chapters 8 and 9 of that book do something extraordinary. They lay out a detailed geographic division of the known world and assign specific regions to the descendants of Noah, and within those descendants to specific tribal lines that later tradition associates with the 12 tribes. Let me give you some specific examples. The territory associated with Judah in ancient geographic tradition aligns with the Bight of Benin and the coastal region that Portuguese maps labeled Judah or Weda. We covered this. Established. The territory associated with Benjamin sits just east of that, along what colonial records called the Slave Coast, stretching into what is now southeastern Benin and western Nigeria. The territory associated with Levi aligns with regions around the Bight of Benin proper, the area known in slave trade records as the primary loading zone for that stretch of coastline. And the territories of Ephraim and Manasseh, the two sons of Joseph, align with regions further south along the Central African coast, including areas around modern-day Angola and the Congo River Basin. Now I want to pause here and be clear about something, because I know some of you are already typing in the comments. We are not claiming that every single person taken from West Africa belonged to a specific biblical tribe. We are not claiming this is settled history. What we are doing is laying out a hypothesis, a historical and geographic hypothesis, and asking whether the data supports it. And the data is interesting, very interesting. What do you think? Does the geographic alignment feel like coincidence to you? Drop your answer in the comments below. This is the part where we open the database. The Slave Voyages Transatlantic Slave Trade Database is publicly available. It was built by a consortium of universities, including Emory, Harvard, and institutions across Europe. It is the most comprehensive historical record of the transatlantic slave trade ever compiled. Over 36,000 documented voyages, each voyage tagged with a port of departure, a port of arrival, estimated captives, and dates. It was built to document a tragedy. It was honored to the memory of millions of people. And today, we're going to read it through a different lens. Let's start with Ouida. The port historically called Ouida, later renamed Ouida after the 1884 Berlin Conference, which we'll talk about in a moment, was one of the single busiest slave trade departure points on the entire African coast. Tens of thousands of people were shipped from this port across the Atlantic. Where did they go? A significant portion went to Jamaica, to Barbados, to the British Caribbean colonies. Now go back to the ancient territorial maps. The region of Ouida sits within the coastal zone that historical and geographic tradition associated with the territory of Benjamin, the tribe immediately adjacent to Judah in the east. Coincidence? Maybe, but let's keep going. The port of Bonny, located in the Niger Delta. Today, we call it in modern Nigeria, near the...
So I find that interesting, the fact that Benjamin and Judah, right, that was the southern tribe. And we can see, as we were talking about the kings and Rehoboam, Jeroboam, and all that, actually how it's separated. They are saying even in Africa that Benjamin and Judah was in the same proximity, just like they were in Israel together. So it's interesting, right, to hear that, how Yah is still, and even sometimes even some of our brothers and sisters in Africa that know who they are, they will even say that some of their towns were named like Jerusalem, or, you know, some of the biblical names. So there's actually evidence that, you know, some of the, as they migrated over into these other areas, that they basically kept those traditions going on and knew who they were as well. Now there's also some of the Europeans that came, they also knew some, you know, knew some of the history of the Bible. And there's this whole thing about some of the Europeans thinking that they are the tribe of Israel as well. So, you know, there's some of that too. But it's amazing that all around the African coast, I wish I would have shared that as well. There's a Benea shows that this scholar that he was talking about how the history of a lot of the spots were actually named after tribes of Israel from an African perspective. And maybe if I find that, I will show it at another time. But it's just interesting when you see all those things, right? And this is history that's not being taught to us or told to us. So how did this guy that's on this, you know, how did he come across this, you know? So this is the importance to truly understand where the sources of this information that he's mentioned is coming from. And, you know, as a community of people, instead of, you know, doing all the you know, it's nothing wrong to celebrate our culture, but a lot of times when we have Black history events like Juneteenth, Martin Luther King Day, right, there's always a different focus other than us trying to understand who we are as a people, right? You can see how, you know, what was it, Sexy Red and all these people had all these concerts last year that really wasn't, you know, that's actually a negative, right, look on our people, versus, you know, having a positive where, you know, you try to have some of these discussions and talk about these things as a group, you know, and sometimes people be like, you know, they don't want to talk about those things, right? They're like, oh, you know, let's not talk about that. We want to keep it positive. It's like, how is our history positive at all? And unless there's a connection back to, like we see here in the Bible, and then they're like, oh, that's, you know, that's conspiracy theory. So to me, it's just interesting how we look at our people and we don't really go down into the history to connect to these type of things. These things are avoided but the negative stuff is good, right? That with things that we want to do from that standpoint. So just want to point out how a lot of these tribes were mentioned and actually kept account of, even by Europeans, as they went to these places to enslave these tribes. So some of them actually were targeted, right, by the help of some of the other African tribes, you know, that's discussion that we showed before. So it's very interesting to hear how they logged some of the people too. All right.
City of Port Harcourt. In the Transatlantic Database, Bonny is listed as one of the largest departure points in all of Africa, and the primary destination for enslaved people departing from Bonny? Brazil, specifically the Brazilian states of Bahia and Pernambuco. Now, look at the ancient geographic assignment again. The region of the Niger Delta and the surrounding coastal zone aligns in the Jubilees framework with the tribal zone of Simeon, the second son of Jacob, and the tribe of Simeon, in ancient tradition, is associated with a people who would be scattered and dispersed even among their own brothers. Are you starting to see the pattern? Let's go further south. The port of Luanda, Angola, one of the largest slave trade ports in all of human history. Millions of people departed from this single location over the course of 3 centuries. The primary destination from Luanda? The Spanish Caribbean, Cuba, Puerto Rico, parts of Mexico and Peru. And the ancient territorial alignment? The region around the Congo River Basin and the Angolan coast is associated in the Jubilees framework with the tribal zone of Ephraim, the son of Joseph, who in ancient prophecy was described as becoming a multitude of nations. Ephraim, a multitude of nations, scattered across Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Spanish Main, the Viceroyalty of Peru. Now, here's the question I want you to sit with. Is this a reading that we're forcing onto the data, or does the data suggest it independently? Because here's what makes this different from a typical religion.
All right, so we got a question. What was the timeline for these kings of Judah in West Africa? Because last I checked, they never existed. So I don't know what that means. So if you know the timeline of the airway people, please put it in the chat. I think a lot of people don't realize that, you know, well, I think, oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think he actually trusts in African oral history. I think he's more, I think, if not, you know, I think this is the same guy that talks about more of the European ancient Greek history. But the Africans actually had their own oral customs and their migration. So we have videos about that too. So look up the one around the airway people, because, you know, Benin is actually connected to the airway people, and they actually have a tradition of migrating to West Africa and knowing their circumcision and customs even before colonization. So we have to basically make sure that we expand our knowledge, not only based upon what, you know, mostly Europeans recorded, but also there's, you know, history from many different viewpoints that we got to understand, especially our own people. We got to make sure, you know, that we come from West Africa. We know we come from the slave trade, so we know we descend from these people. And, you know, just because Europeans say that they have, you know, try to give us a negative understanding about who we are. And, you know, a lot of times we will side with the European information just because they, you know, wrote it first. When a lot of people don't realize in Africa that there's not a lot of archaeology digs. There's a lot, you know, they just found out that Benin Wall that was, you know, well, even this guy was talking about it, is longer than, you know, the Wall of China at one time, right? They thought that, but it was very comparable in size. And this is just more recent knowledge, right? Like, how do you miss the fact that they had this big, huge wall? So there's a lot of these discoveries now opening up because we have people that care about our people, right? That was living in West Africa and don't just listen to what was stated by Europeans. But all this information together is very important. There's one about the Muslims that came over and they spoke about certain things, right? So we have to take all these different resources together and understand what that history is, right? To come down, even the area that they lived in, some people, Widda, Wuda, Judah, There are some maps that actually go back past even some of the places where they're calling Kingdom of Judah. Benaiah talks about it and how they actually have some of the African names presented also. So even in the kingdoms of Africa, they were calling each other, calling them connected to Judah, even way back then, right? So it's very important for us to trust our people in some regards and listen to the stories and not just listen to European sources as well. All right. Thank you for mentioning that.
Argument. We did not start with the conclusion. The conclusion is what the geographic coordinates point to when you lay two independent data sets on top of each other. One data set is ancient. One data set was compiled by 19th and 20th century European academics who were not trying to prove anything about the Bible, and yet they match. Tell me in the comments, which of these port connections surprised you the most? Bani to Brazil, Luanda to the Spanish Caribbean, or something else? Now, let's talk about 1884. In November of 1884, the major European powers gathered in Berlin: Germany, Britain, France, Portugal, Belgium, and others. The stated purpose was to formalize the rules of colonial acquisition in Africa and to divide the continent in an orderly way. This is what historians call the Berlin Conference, or sometimes the Congo Conference. It produced the General Act of Berlin in 1885, and what that act did, in practical terms, was redraw the entire map of Africa, not just the political borders, the names. Here's what most history classes don't teach you. Before the Berlin Conference, the West African coastline had
So that's one thing they do not teach, right? The Berlin Conference. You know, I heard it within our communities, but I've never heard that in school. Rather, if it's, K through 12, or even when I was in college, even at some of these Black History, right, events, I've never heard them talk about what happened during the Berlin Conference. Now, a lot of that happened a little after slavery, as well, but still it changes the geographic standpoint of Africa a lot with the countries that were named. Now I remember how they used to call Congo Zaire, right? I remember that name, and then they switched it to Congo. Like, why did, a lot of times people don't know what happened. Or the Gold Coast got changed to Ghana. Why did they choose the name Ghana? Because there was an older empire named Ghana, right, called Ouagadougou, one of the first empires, and it was founded by the Soninke and Sissi. He was the founder of the Soninke Empire, or wouldn't say the founder, but he was the king that actually helped establish them. And he had a tradition that he came from Yemenite Jews even. Some of them also have some traditions that he came from Elephantine, where they had the Israelite temple over in Egypt. So, why haven't we heard of these things? Like I said, in all these years, I'm about 50. So all these years of Black History Month, and we never heard of any of this stuff, especially until now. Why is that? Where's the scholars of our communities, and what do they know, and how were we need to go back and look at that. When it comes to a lot of these, a lot of our Black historical NAACPs and stuff like that, what are we doing to preserve this knowledge and assimilate it among our people from generation to generation, instead of some of this other stuff that we hear that, sometimes is even distracting, right? Or it becomes more about dancing and partying and not about trying to preserve, like other countries or other nations and ethnicities of people. They put a lot of money into trying to preserve their history. And here, as a people, we don't know much. And it's only been 400 years, at least here in America, that we've been here from a English colony standpoint. I put it that way because Spain and stuff, we've been here even much longer, if you have some of that history, but down in Florida. But anyway, where do we go when we're looking for our history? Most of the time I find it's to, European schools, right? Even our HBCUs don't even talk about a lot of the history or preserve it, because I've called them and tried to talk to some of them. So I do know I do know there's actually Black historians who are paid not to teach our history. So what's going on with that, right? And how do we basically get and preserve our history and once again into a way that we can actually pass it on from generation to generation. So that's why it's so important for us to reach out even to, people on the other side, right? Our history doesn't start with slavery. And I think, at least from an African-American standpoint, or Caribbeans, right, Black Brits and wherever else that we were taken, that's where our understanding starts. I heard even like the Afro-Iranians and people over even in the East, they say they don't know how they got to those places. So with so much technology out there today, we should now be able to do just like this guy is able to do. We're like, where's our black scholars that's able to get hold of the same information this man is able to do? What are they doing with that information? A lot of times you see them present it to Europeans or Euro-Americans, no issue with them knowing, but that's what their main focus is, because they're trying to sell books and materials and documentation, right? It's only small number of people that come out and do what we're hearing today of some of the resources and things that's out there. So why, what's wrong with our communities where we're not preserving this and this is not within our own reach, right? So just want to make sure I point that out, because, I'm just listening to this guy on other stuff, and I'm trying to figure out, number one, why is he doing this, right? And then why is it hard? Why haven't I heard some of this stuff even within the Israelite community, right? So we got to look at that, right? And then, there's a lot of people in our Israelite community that has so much information. So how do we now preserve that in a way? I know that Dante Forson has I don't even know this thing called OmniDeck or Black History in the Bible. Well, he preserves a lot. Those are the things we need to start to do. He has an encyclopedia for Hebrew Israelites, right? So those are the things we definitely need to do, because, a book, like the Bible, right? It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And we know that these videos on YouTube could easily, in 1 second get deleted. If YouTube decides to get rid of, like they've been doing, of people's channels. So we got to figure out a way to preserve this information, and as we discover more information, to make sure that we keep it, right, to archive it so other generations can build upon that, and we don't keep on losing the history as, one generation, passes on, I should say, in that way. All right, thank you.
Very different set of names that had accumulated for 4 centuries of contact between African peoples and European traders, missionaries, and navigators. Names that reflected what the people who lived there called themselves and their land: the Slave Coast, the Gold Coast, the Grain Coast, the Ivory Coast. These were the names used on every map, every ship manifest, every colonial document for hundreds of years. And Whydah, the port of Whydah, which appears on maps going back to the 1600s, sometimes labeled with a remarkable variant spelling, Judah, a direct linguistic link to the ancient name of Judah. After the Berlin Conference, the renaming process accelerated dramatically. Whydah became Ouidah, a Frenchified spelling that obscured the original phonetic root. The Slave Coast became Dahomey, named to an inland kingdom that was then used to define the entire coastal region. Territories that had been labeled on colonial maps with historically significant names were absorbed into French West Africa, British West Africa, German Togoland, and Belgian Congo, administrative units that served colonial governance but erased geographic memory. Now, here's the detail that historians rarely highlight. The port names were changed before the territorial names. The shipping infrastructure, the actual economic arteries of the trade, was renamed first. Why would that be? One explanation, and this is worth debating, is that port records were the paper trail, the point of connection between what was taken and where it came from. If you change the name of the port, you change the reference point in the historical record. Future researchers looking for Whydah in pre-colonial maps find a different name in post-colonial maps, and the thread goes cold. I'm not saying this was a conspiracy with a capital C. Colonial administrators had many practical reasons for standardizing place names: linguistic convenience, bureaucratic efficiency, alignment with local political powers. But the effect, Whatever the intention, was the systematic erasure of the geographic vocabulary that connected the West African coast to its pre-colonial identity. The maps from the 1600s said Judah. The shipping records from the same era logged departures from Wida. The people being shipped were sometimes listed by the names Europeans gave to their ethnic groups, names that in many cases trace back to root words in Semitic languages. This is not invented. These are the primary source documents. Go look at them. Many are digitized and available online. What do you think? Was the renaming of these ports historically significant or just administrative housekeeping? Let me know in the comments. Genuinely curious how people on both sides of this debate are thinking about it. Now let's close the loop. There is a passage in the 5th book of Moses, Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 64, that has been read by Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scholars for thousands of years. It describes a consequence that would fall upon a specific people if they abandoned the covenant they had made. The passage reads in its most common English translation, "The Lord will scatter you among all peoples, from one end of the earth to the other." Not one nation, not one region, among all peoples. Now here's where the transatlantic slave trade database becomes perhaps its most extraordinary witness. When researchers analyzed the destination data in the database, every port of arrival across 3 centuries of the transatlantic trade, they identified receiving nations and territories across 4 continents. The total count of distinct national destinations? 43. 43 separate national and colonial territories across North America, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe received enslaved people from the West and Central African coast. The United States, Brazil, Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, Puerto Rico, Mexico, Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, Suriname, Guyana, the Dutch Antilles, the Danish Virgin Islands, and more, from one end of the earth to the other. Now I want to be careful here. I'm not telling you that this proves the transatlantic slave trade was a divine punishment. I am not making a theological claim. People of many different faiths and no faith in all have strong and legitimate reasons to resist that framing. What I am saying is this. From a purely historical and documentary standpoint, the pattern described in that ancient text, written over 2,000 years ago, matches the documented dispersal pattern recorded in a 21st century academic database. One said, scattered among all peoples from one end of the earth to the other. The other counted 43 nations across 4 continents. How you interpret that is up to you. That's the honest position. That's what this channel is about, presenting the evidence and letting you think. But I'll tell you this, when I first laid those 2 data sets side by side, I sat with it for a long time. Because whatever you believe about prophecy, whatever you believe about religion, the specificity of the match is not something you can dismiss in 30 seconds. 12 tribes, 12 departure zones, 43 nations of arrival, and a text written in a language that predates colonialism by 2 millennia. That's the claim on the table, and it deserves serious examination. Here's where we are. We started with a question that nobody seemed to be asking. Portugal found Judah on the West African coast. Everybody talks about that. But what about the other 11? And what we found, not in religious speculation, but in documented colonial records, academic shipping databases, and ancient texts that were written over 1,000 years before European contact with sub-Saharan Africa, is a pattern, port by port, region by region, tribe by tribe. The Book of Jubilees assigns territories. The Portuguese maps confirm the ancient names. The transatlantic slave trade database logs the departure points, and the destination records show the dispersal across 43 nations. Each of those layers comes from a completely different source, different languages, different centuries, different institutions. None of them were talking to each other, and yet they tell the same story. Now, I know this video is going to generate strong reactions. Some of you are historians who are going to push back on specific claims. Good, push back. Drop the sources in the comments. That's how knowledge actually works. Some of you are going to feel like this is confirming something you already sensed was true. That's valid too. But don't stop at the feeling. Go verify it yourself. The Slave Voyages database is free and public. The Book of Jubilees is freely available in translation. The colonial-era maps are digitized and online. Primary sources, always primary sources. Some of you are going to fall somewhere in the middle, fascinated, unsure, wanting to know more. That is exactly where intellectual honesty lives. Stay there as long as you need to. History is not finished. The story of the African diaspora is not finished. The questions about who these people were before they were taken, before they were renamed, before their ports were renamed, before their territories were absorbed into colonial administrative units, those questions are not settled. And questions that are not settled deserve to be asked out loud. If this video gave you something to think about, share it with someone who studies history. Share it with someone who doesn't. Let the conversation happen. Subscribe if you want to keep going, because the next chapter goes deeper. We're going to look at the linguistic evidence, the actual words, the root sounds, the naming patterns that survived in the cultures of the diaspora across those 43 nations. The evidence is still there. It never went anywhere. It was just waiting to be read. What if I told you that...
All right, so hopefully that's helpful to understand what all is going on, right? Some of the resources and stuff that's out there that we need to look at, because that Slave Voyage database is so important, because it will show us the different areas that our people were taken from in slavery all throughout Caribbeans and in America, the Americas. There are also another database that's connected to that on the same site that actually shows you how the ones from the Caribbeans took people back and forth to different areas throughout the Americas as well. So we can see a lot. So if you start doing your DNA and your genealogy, and you can connect with certain places, like me, I can connect to Jamaica, to Barbados, to Tobago, to the Dominican Republic. So there's also a whole bunch of little islands too that I can see. You know, I talked to some of my family members from there that, you know, tell me about islands I never even heard of, right? That, you know, it's not some of the main items that you usually hear. But also you can even hear how some of the people were even sent to places like Peru and Venezuela, and, you know, all throughout that. So I find it interesting. So when you go to the next slide. My wife, she's working out something right now with the slides, but at least on the slides, you might put on that right screen and do it from there. I don't know if y'all can see the slides or not, but at least you can, you know, that from Peru, you'll see, at least on my history, you'll see some of the connections to even Peru. So if you go down the slide some more, okay. So this is my DNA here, and I'll go up one. And you can see here, you know, a lot of the different areas that my DNA kind of connects to. And you can even see there with Puerto Rico and Mexico, and, you know, let me see, it says Australia, Milwaukee, you know, that's California. So, you know, at first I was like, you know, this is just shows you how your DNA is connected to other people around the world, right? To that mix, and some of the possible ancestors that your people could actually have. So, you know, we always talk about this with the Limba tribe. It was interesting too, because I found out today that my DNA actually connects to Zimbabwe. And in one of the DNA tests, it said it was like 9% connected. So I found that interesting because that's where the Limba people live. And one of the Yimbi that's over in the Congo area, the Yimbi tribe actually connects to the Limba tribe, told me that he found one of my DNA Limba cousins. So I'm interested more in that. And then we have another Ak that's in Tennessee, well, from Tennessee, and he actually shows like, based upon the ancient maps, he shows like 0% connection to certain dig sites in Africa, right around those same areas. And it's interesting because, you know, from a relative standpoint, like you see on the left side of this map, it just shows you the lower the number, the closer I am to those people. So the fact that he has a 0%, that means he's like almost directly bloodline. That's exactly his people. And the fact that he's in Tennessee, he was in Tennessee. I mean, he's an African American guy. Like how did he have that close of an alignment to those people? So from my understanding, some of his people, you know, some of our people over in, you know, Dimona area, that Telluride area, is actually helping him with his discovery. And we're trying to also see how we can connect him to the right people over in the Limba area too, so we can have more of those conversations. But at least here you can see some of these, you know, people that's more considered to be Hispanic, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and so forth. The next slide. You can see here that, you know, this is my DNA, that there's a test that tries to connect you to Native Americans. So Shabbat Shalom. Yeah, we got Miss Cousin there. She knows a little bit about knows a lot about the Caribbeans there. But here you can see even from these different Native American areas, they try to connect you. Now, one thing we got to understand is that Native Americans, who did they get this sampling from for Native Americans, right? So also be aware of that. Because, you know, they just go around to different places and they'll first, and well, some of the more modern tests like this one, they'll go around and say, okay, who's the most closest to this territory? And they'll take their DNA, and then that's what considers to be those people's DNA, you know, that on your DNA test pops up. And, you know, I like the ones like that you'll see next that actually goes based upon the archaeology digs, because they'll take bones out of the ground of the people. Because, you know, after wars and migrations and what happened even during the slave trade, they wiped out a lot of Native Americans because of the disease, right? That, like, the disease basically killed like 70, 80, 90% of the people in these areas because they could not tolerate, you know, a lot of disease infestations of Europe, right? They were just getting through sewers, you know, it was very nasty in Europe, especially before the, well, you know, during the Dark Ages. You know, that's when people talk about the Moors came up there and showed them about, you know, deodorant, soap, bathing, all those different things that change, you know, keep your animals separate from your livestock, separate from your living quarters, and a lot of those things that actually happen. But, you know, a lot of that disease, you know, that they were able to tolerate during that time because they built up the immunity. A lot of those things have never been brought to the tribes over here in America. So when they got it, you know, they just died left and right, you know, like a plague. So now, and even they took some of the Native Americans, like I said before, forced them into boarding schools, forced them to integrate in with the Europeans. And even they talk about how, you know, they don't like be considered Caucasian because of all the things that was done to them during that time. So, you know, so keep that in mind when you're talking about DNA. But, you know, here it talks about the closest one are the Southern Andes people. And you can see the most DNA I have, at least in that area, is in South America. I thought it was North America because I know about, you know, my history of my family being connected to the Tuscarora, to the Lumbee, you know, I'm missing some tribes there. The Kohari, some of them the same, the Croatans and stuff, right? So I know some of my family connection to some of those. So go back up a slide, actually. So that's important, right? Up a slide. Other one. Yeah. So you can see there, all right, I have Lumbee. So it shows that I have some Lumbee, North America DNA. So, but if you go on the next test, next slide, you know, here it puts, you know, it doesn't even show, oh, plain the eastern woodlands it has as 0.2%. So we know something is going on, right, with that. But anyway, but here in the southern Andes, that's like in Peru area and Argentina. So how did my DNA even get to those areas at all, right? Like, how would that get into African American DNA, right? So next slide, that's where I want. So when I actually go to their other test, this is the ancient DNA test. You can see here where my DNA is coming up in Brazil, right? Then it says the oldest South American inhabitant is my DNA. And then the Peruvian hunter-gatherer women DNA, right? So I wish I had showed you the dates that's connected to that, but at least when it starts talking about the oldest South American inhabitants, right? This is, you know, also the areas of like the Inca people, also in Peru, right? Like, and I have now my ancestry, you know, it only shows 6 generations in ancestry. So, you know, if you see something up there, that means there are at least 6 generations close to you, right? Within those 6 generations. So I have people in Peru popping up, you know, that actually live in the historical city of like the Incas, and also Lima. And depending on if it's my mom or my dad's side, I kind of, you know, ancestry will tell you what side it's on. But I find that very interesting because remember I told y'all last time, well, before, I wouldn't say last time, but how one night my DNA said 4% Peru, and then the next day it changed to 4% Portuguese. And as you heard in the video, he talked about how even some of the slave trade were the people that was taken to Peru, Ecuador. There's even some, my Congolese friend tells me how some of their tribe was found in somewhere on the left side of, what was it, Chile? I can't remember, he told me, but maybe it's Ecuador. But how their tribe was found there, and they still to this day speak the same Congolese language as they do in Africa, right, throughout the slave trade. So even on the east side of South America, we find people that was enslaved and descended, and they don't talk about that much, right? Even Argentina, they say that, you know, there were slaves taken there, but there's not a lot of black people from the slave trade that's still there today, kind of like they, you know, filtered them out, rather through wars or death, or not giving them, you know, equal rights. There's a lot of controversy about that because they say they're the whitest country in South America. So how did they get that if they had slaves? So that's the history stuff, right, that we should be looking at, because they just made a connection to the slave trade to not just Brazil, right? Because me growing up, I remember, what was that movie we talk about from Brazil, that Disney movie?
Rio de Janeiro.
What's the movie called?
Rio de Janeiro.
Rio? Oh, Rio. Yeah, Rio, about the little bird and stuff in Disney movie. And I remember seeing that movie, and I'm seeing these black people. I'm like, what's these black people doing in Brazil? You know, this is before they really shared a lot about what was going on in Brazil with the slave trade. So I didn't even know they had, Brazil actually has the most black people outside of Africa, more than even America. So like, why don't we know our Brazilian cousins, right? We should have some same people. And even when we talk about the Israelites, I don't even hear people talking about the Israelites that live in Brazil. I don't see any presentations and their connections to some of the South American places. I hear about the Caribbeans, but I don't hear about a lot of connections other than what we talked about when it came to Guyana and Suriname and stuff like that, right, that we had a couple of weeks ago. But what about all the other places? What are our connections there? Because even there were some people that were persecuted by the Jesuits, and during the time of the Spanish Inquisition, they were finding finding Portuguese, I'm put it that way. They were going all the way down here to hunt for those people, right? So what's the relationship to us in those areas too? So just want to kind of, you know, broaden our understanding, or, you know, start some of those discussions, because, you know, we got to make sure we understand the prophecy says that we'll be gathered across the 4 corners, not just in America or North America, right? Not just in the Caribbeans, right? People don't even talk. We talk a little bit about the Black Brits, but I don't even know what's going on there. I know that I hear some of my old youth friends. They're from Britain and stuff. They're Black Brits, and they say, hey, there's Israelites there too. But I don't see that a lot in YouTube and, you know, hear them in some of these conversations. So we definitely got to find some of our people, not just in Africa and America and the Caribbeans, but what about some of these other places too? And if you are from those descendants, if you're watching this, or if you know of people, have them to, you know, reach out to us, because we'll love to have some of those conversations. We're trying to have more conversations like we used to do. I have to meet with the Limba tribe, contact some of them tomorrow, and we're going to have some discussions on some of the stuff we recently found, right? So we're trying to, that's what Memleket Kohanim is about, not just about a whole bunch of videos, but also about using this information for us to preserve and to discuss. So, you know, I saw somebody had Russian Jew or something. So if you know some of your history, I've seen Russia pop up on my ancestry for some reason. I don't know. I know we had some, you know, Jewish enslavement within our family. So some of those might be connected through that. Not sure. But it's still good to know. I have people in Israel, like I said, that pop up. I've seen my DNA, people connected to Israel, and that I'm connected to now. And I think through the Sephardic Jewish heritage, but never know, you know, until we go through that. All right. So next. All right. Hopefully that was helpful to you all. You know, stuff that I'm just finding out myself as we go through this. So this stuff is what is helping me to you know, broaden my understanding. If there's something that you already have or some information you already know, please share that as we see these videos, and that's how we continue to grow together. As the man even said, right? Like, put something in the comments, let us know if you have some information that would be helpful, or any questions even in the stuff that we share, so to make sure that we vet our own stuff, right? So I'm just getting information from here and there, but I'm just one person. So we as a people need to grow together, not just fight among each other based upon some European sources, but based upon what we all know, right? Let's vet out the source and try to find people that have this history, and then let's see what they say from their side as well. And that way we're able to grow and not be deceived as a people. All right, so going into the lesson today, I know we're going through the Kings, and you know, the lessons are, you know, going through a lot of history, so I wasn't able to really make these slides as beautiful as usual, but you know, it's important for us to understand the history of the kings. So last week we went through at least some of the first kings of the northern tribe, right? And you know, how they quickly had king after king after king, you know, in a short amount of time. And now I wanted to do that. So now when we do the kings of Judah, you can see how some of those connections was going, because they're going to start fighting and they start intermarrying. And if you know, get caught up in just the names, you start getting confused. But it also leads to where we are today. So all, like he was saying, you know, when he was talking about Benjamin and Judah being in Benin, around the kingdom of Judah, and Benjamin was close by, that's what we're talking about, right? How the kingdoms divided, and how those two tribes, because Judah and Benjamin were not full-blooded brothers, right? We talked about that. So how did they get connected to each other? We talked about that, you know, about the two tribes that was selected when the 10 tribes that was selected by Jeroboam, right? He had the chance to select 10 of the tribes because of the sin of Solomon, and Solomon, you know, had the kingdom taken away from Judah. Well, was about to, except for the fact that even Jeroboam from Ephraim actually sinned. So Ephraim first had the kingdom, right, from Joseph, right? He was given the blessings and stuff, and then because of his, you know, the descendants and some of the stuff that Saul did, and, you know, Abimelech and some of the other first kings, you know, was given to David. And then we can see that Solomon messed that up, and then it was given back to Jeroboam, and then Jeroboam messed that up with the golden calves, and it, you know, goes back to David. So we'll see a lot of that, you know, going back and forth because of the sin, all the way up until the captivity of the northern tribe, and then to Assyria, and then eventually it will lead to the captivity of the southern tribe to Babylon. And you know, there's a lot more history there for us to discuss. All right, so next is a disclaimer. I don't think I have many pictures, or I do have some chart of somebody else I use. So just want to make sure people know we're just using this for teaching and criticism, just for us to be able to share to our people and to get better understanding to all those that are able to come and view on the site. So, you know, we're welcoming all people. We're not just saying that it's just that our people are the ones that don't get this information, and it's not common among us, and it's not shared. There's a lot of people talking about us, but they're not talking to us. So that's the reason why I decided as a minister, even as a Christian minister at the time, where I just said, hey, I got to go focus on our people. And then I came across this information that, you know, feels like how Yah continues to take us. So where, you know, I even found out about Christianity and some of the history that happened there. And, you know, that's what led me to be Messianic and Hebrew Messianic. Now, there's a difference between Hebrew Messianic and Hebrew, you know, Messianic Judaism. If you watched the video yesterday, I talk a little bit about that. And now, where I am now, meeting our people throughout the four corners, the Israelites, you know, African Israelites, even Native American Israelites, all kind of people. It's so important how Yah is taking us to this course to basically make us his people once again. So we got to make sure that we're a part of that mission that Yah has for our people, and not just on our own mission. All right, so next. So this is the Zechariah 14 that I read earlier for the Bible at the beginning of the service, or the Shabbat service. And we can see that Yah has a plan, right? So this goes back to his plan. And then he says there's going to be a day that we return back to the land, and that the spoil taken will be divided among us. So we know about the book of Isaiah, I think is Isaiah, is it 60? I think. When it talks about you going on the ships of Tarshish, and they're going to take you back with gold and silver and all this stuff, how he's going to bring us all throughout the world. Ezekiel 20, so he's going to bring everybody out, and then he's going to divide us and stuff, right, based upon our heart. But after we get back to the land, we know there's going to be something. There's going to be more battling and fighting. Even Isaiah 11 we talk about the three wars of the end time, right? And the first war is Isaiah 11, when it says we'll swoop down on the Philistines after Ephraim and Judah comes together. But even in Ezekiel 38 and 39, it talks about how, you know, we're going to be at peace. And then, you know, evil thoughts going to come on the minds of the nations, and they're going to be like, hey, those people are sitting without a city without walls, and we have all this gold and stuff, right? We got all this stuff that we brought back to the land, and they're going to be like, hey, just like Pharaoh after he let go of our ancestors, right? He was like, hey, wait a minute, I just let go of all our slaves, and then the people gave them gold and they left, right? So once again, that was a foreshadowing of what's to come. So in last days, we'll be given gold and silver from the nations. It says they're going to build up Jerusalem for us, right? And so it's just interesting to see how it's getting tore up today in the war of Iran. And I'm trying to see how all this is going to transpire. But you got to make sure you understand some of the scripture there too. But anyway, he talks about how, you know, that they will gather all the nations against Jerusalem. Right, so there's going to be something to happen even after we get that. The city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, and the half of the city exiled. But the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city. So when is that going to happen? Is it going to be happening before we get there, after? You know, could it be what's going on now? Not sure, right? But it says, then Yahuwah will go forth and fight against, because we got people there now. That's what I'm talking about. We got Israelites living. That's that whole 3-4 weeks that we've been talking about. The people that's living in Dimona, right? Like Yah has people there, the Ethiopian Jews, the Beta Israel Jews. Some people don't agree that they are, you know, Israelites, but we do, as you saw in my DNA, we do have them in our blood for some reason. But then it says, then they will go forth and fight against those nations. Well, then Yahuwah will go forth and fight against those nations as when he fights on the day of battle. So we know there's a battle that's going to happen, right? And then in verse 4, we know that Yahushua is coming back, because he says he's coming back to the Mount of Olives. And it says in that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives will split in its middle from east to west by a very large valley, so that half of the mount will be moved toward the north and the other towards the south. So we know that in Acts, that's where Yahushua told the disciples, they asked him, hey, is this the time that, you know, the kingdom will come back unto Israel? He said, it's not the time for you to know that, you know, focus on what you're supposed to do. So we know that that's the same place that he's going to return, and this is the story of his return, right? So just to skip through some of that, because we're talking about the kings of Judah. So in verse 9 it says, Yahuwah will be king over all the earth. So he wants to be king over us, right? So a lot of our decisions and our mindsets is about what we want to do, right? And that's the true battle. It's not just the battle of fighting between good and evil of, this kingdom Gog and Yahusha, right? The kingdom of Judah and Israel, right? That's not that. It's just that's the final battle. But the true battle is what leads that, right? It's the heart of people. And a lot of times people's heart is for what they want. Just like Adam and Eve eating of the fruit when they wanted to be gods, right? The snake said, you'll be gods. And what does that mean? You have control over your own life. You can choose what you want to do, right? It's your thing, do what you want to do. And you can see a lot of youth and young adults now having that attitude, like, I'm gonna do what I want to do, right? It's not no longer based upon the Bible. It's based upon what people tell them and science. A lot of the youth from my former church used to, I used to teach them all about creationism and all that, and they'll go to school and hear about Darwinism and a lot of stuff that really doesn't make sense when you really think about it. But they just have in their heart that they don't want to do the things that Yah is telling them to do, so they will lean toward those things that would take them astray. And then there's going to come a time that we all have to be going before the throne in judgment, and we have to give account of the day, that, the life that we live. And Yah is going to say every knee will bow and every tongue will confess, right? No matter, he's going to basically pull even people from the grave, and we all have to go before him in judgment and saying, did we do what was right or not, right? So Yah is going to be king over all the earth, whether we like it or not. And a kingdom has a king, right, in his domain. So anybody that's lived in a domain got to do what the king told them to do, tells them to do. It's not about our life, it's about what he wants. And we'll see even in these stories how Yah has control even over our success in life, for the good and for the bad. But it says in that day, Yahuwah will be the only one and his name the only one. So we only know him. The whole world will have to recognize him as king, right? So it's also interesting. I should have brought this as part of the lesson. If you don't mind, would you pull up Blue Letter Bible on the right, and then and go to Jeremiah 31. But it says, and the land will be changed into a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Georgia. But Jerusalem will rise and remain on its site from Benjamin's gate as far as the place of the first gate to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel to the king's wine press. So, reason why I asked my wife to bring that up, because, just because I try to, we talked about these prophecies and stuff before, and maybe I have to go back through it again because it's repetition, that's how I teach, is repetition. But,
Let me know when you want me to switch over.
yeah, hold on. There, I'm trying to make sure I'm at the right place. Yeah, go ahead and switch over, I'll find it. So we can see that even as part of that the same place, right? So we can see, over there, over in Zechariah 14, it said on verse 10, which I was saying earlier, it was saying from Benjamin's gate to the first gate to the corner gate, from the tower of Hanel to the king's wine press, right? So here in Jeremiah, and if we go down to verse 38, I can't see it, so tell me when you get there.
I'm there.
Okay, so it says, behold, the days are coming, declares Yahuwah, when the city will be rebuilt for Yahuwah from the tower of Hananel to the corner gate. That's the same thing. So the measuring line will go out farther straight ahead to the hill Gareb, then it will turn to Goah, and the entire valley of the dead bodies and of the ashes, and of all the fields as far as the brook Kidron to the corner of the horse gate toward the east shall be holy to Yahuwah. It will not be uprooted or overthrown ever again. So that is definitely a last day prophecy, connects back to Zechariah, right? And it's important because we go right here in Jeremiah, and if we go up to 31, verse 31, we'll see even there, you on verse 31? There we can see where it says, behold, the days are coming, declares Yahuwah, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers on the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them, declares Yahuwah. For this is the covenant which I will make to the house of Israel after those days, declares Yahuwah. I will put my law within them and write it on their heart, and I will be their Yah, and they shall be my people. They will not teach again each of their neighbor and each one his brother, saying, know Yahuwah, for they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares Yahuwah. For I will forgive their wrongdoing, and their sin I will no longer remember. So that's interesting, right? There's all this is in the same chapter, right? And scroll all the way to the top. Now I'll leave it there. But at the very first verse, it says, at that time declares Yahuwah, I will be the Yah of all the families of Israel, and they shall be my people. This is what Yahuwah says. The people who survived the sword, let you know persecution, found grace in the wilderness. Israel, when it went to find its rest. Yahuwah appeared to him long ago, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. That means forever. So through all this history of kings doing wrong and all that stuff, he still has this everlasting love for us. Therefore, I have drawn you out with kindness. I will build you again, and you will be rebuilt, Virgin of Israel. You will take up your tambourines again and go out to the dancers of the revelers. Again, you will plant vineyards on the hills of Samaria. Samaria is the northern kingdom. So we talked about even how some of the kings rebuilt Samaria, the northern kingdom, right? So that just shows you that that's the northern kingdom. The planters will plant and enjoy the fruit, for there will be a day when the watchmen on the hills of Ephraim, saying that Ephraim will be there. So these are some of the things that we went over earlier on, but just making the whole connection now back to these kings and what's going on, right, into the future. Right, Yah's going to reestablish, and he's going to be the king this time. He's going to make sure he's the king over both, back over the united Israel. And we know that Yahushua's coming to be king of kings and the masters of masters. But it's important to understand, right, that there's going to be, you know, a pathway there, right? So if we just scroll down to verse 10, it says, hear the word of Yahuwah, you nations, and declare it in the coastlands far away. So coastlands are the islands far away, right? And say, he who scattered Israel will gather him, and he will keep him as a shepherd keeps his flock. For Yahuwah has ransomed Jacob and redeemed him from the hands of him who was stronger than he. So it says, then they will come and shout for joy in the height of Zion, and they'll be radiant over the bounty of Yahuwah. So I'll stop there. So, you know, it's very important for us to understand what Yah is doing, right? That how all these scriptures connect. And if we don't understand our history of what happened, how are we going to understand our future, right? Like the King's Gate and, you know, I mean, the corner of the King's Gate, Benjamin's Gate and the corner gate and Hananel, right? Tower. What is these tower of Hananel? What is that? Right? Like we don't even talk about those things a lot, but you know, a lot of people don't like talk about history. They just want to talk about stuff they saw on YouTube and some meme, right? Like we don't want to go back and understand the deep understanding of the Bible, of our history book, of our history. Not even when we talk about even current day history, people get start glossing over. But when it comes to Bible history, you know, the book that we had probably most of our life that we grew up in Christian church, and a lot of times we don't even read it, right? We don't even understand these stories, even though we had the same book for thousands and thousands of years, and now we know that this is our history. So going back to Zechariah 14, we switched over? Mm-hmm. All right, so next slide. And it talks about how, you know, people will live in it and there will no longer be a curse, for Jerusalem will dwell in security. Doesn't that sound just like we just read in Jeremiah 31, right? Now this will be the plague on which Yahuwah will shake all the peoples who have gone to war against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they stand on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their socket and their tongue will rot in their mouth. Some people say that's like an atomic bomb or something, but I think that's Yah, you know, the plague. It says a plague, right? So, you know, Yah is doing this to the people. So, you know, a lot of times we try to look at things from a human perspective, but just like when Joshua went to go fight, right? It says that the rocks just came down from heaven. Like, what would cause that, right? Like, Yah has what he's doing, or even Sodom and Gomorrah, how the sulfur came, right? So, like, you know, this is Yah. He wants to make sure that we know that it's his powers that's doing these things, and not just what we can see through man's current day understanding. No telling what kind of weapons they're going to have in the future with laser beams and all that, right? So we just can't look at nuclear missiles and just think that's going to be the end of all, because a lot of times in the battles that we even see in the future, it even talks about how we have clubs and stuff like that, shields. Like, what? Now, why we have clubs and shields in some of the end time battles? Why don't we have lasers or, you know, whatever else, machine guns or something? It doesn't talk like that. It says that even they're going to be burning the weapons for months and months, right? As they clean the land. So let you know something could be happening in the future. Do you believe what the word says? Or you're going to believe what our interpretation or someone else's interpretation of the word is, right? But it says again, right, when it goes down, verse 16, it says, then it will come about that any who are left of all the nations that went against Jerusalem will go up year to year to worship the king. So they got to recognize that he's the king, even those who don't even believe, right? The other nations that came against them, that didn't believe in the Bible, because if you believe in the Bible, you wouldn't even want to go fight them, right? But these people in their heart has basically become so hard and stubborn that they are able now to come and fight because they want what they want to do, right? They want to establish the earth and be gods and not do what Yah has called them to do. So those who, they still going to worship Yahuwah, right? Yahusha, actually, Yahuwah of hosts, to celebrate the Feast of Booths. So we know we got to still do feast days. So, you know, the video I put out yesterday, we talk about feast days. The last couple of videos at the end, not just the stuff a lot of people like to hear about, you know, we being the Israelites, you know, but the actual teaching part. I think somebody one time said Torah portions. I think that's what some people call it. But the teaching part, right, that's the important part to show us where we are now to get to where we need to go. So it's good to know about, you know, we the Israelites and our bloodline and ancestry, but what does going to show us on what we need to do going forward? And that's when I woke up, right? So after I found out all the evidence and all the information that was out there, it was like, how do I move forward in this? I got to now take part of it, not just know it, but take part of it, right? So, so that's good enough. Next slide. So this is what I was talking about, something that we've already talked about, the splitting of the northern and southern kingdom. Right, so we know that's when Rehoboam and Jeroboam basically split. And next slide. So this is important as well. So Jeroboam, after, you know, Yah was blessing him, he was going to say, hey, I'm going to, you know, allow the kingdom, the majority of the kingdom, to go under Ephraim. And Jeroboam, you know, got scared and he went and did his own thing and decided to, you know, say, hey, here's these golden calves. Come worship these golden calves. Do like, you know, come, you know, like these are the ones that brought you out of the land of Egypt. We talked about that, right? So he basically devised in his own heart, even says there, right? That's what Yah's battling. It's a battle of the heart, that we trust in him, or we're going to trust in the man-made institution of what, you know, life have to offer, or we're going to do what Yah has called us to do. So that's the true battle. And he lost that battle, right? Jeroboam decided to do his own thing. And in that he messed up a whole group of people. So that's why I'm like, even with, you know, our people and the next generations, we'll see throughout the lines of the kings, right, that one king messed up his children, right, because they decided to do the same evil. It even says the evil of Jeroboam in some places, even though it's generations later. Or even with Judah, they even say the sins of Jeroboam, right? So Jeroboam really messed up a lot of the kingdom because that he didn't trust in the things of Yah, but he trusted in his own desires, right? I guess that's what he basically ate the fruit like Adam and Eve, right? Did those things that he wanted to do, and that basically made it best for him and not the people. So I feel like, you know, these generations that come after, if they're not prepared, they can really jack up their children and grandchildren and many generations come, just like we can if we don't do what's right. But next slide. So this is where it comes to actually start talking about the southern kingdom. This is interesting, right? Because Jeroboam is of the northern kingdom, right? But this is where it's going to talk about the southern kingdom and prophecy. So in 1 Kings 13, I'm just read through some of this I might skip, but it talks about there was basically a prophet that came to Jeroboam, and it says he came from Judah, right, to Bethel. So Bethel is actually where one of the places those golden calves were, to meet Jeroboam, to bring him a word. And he said in verse 2, he says, he cried against the altar by the word of Yahuwah and said, O altar, thus says Yahuwah, behold, a son shall be born to the house of David, Josiah by name. So this is during the time of Jeroboam and Rehoboam. He's talking about David's kingdom, which is the southern kingdom. And he said he's calling about Josiah. So if you look on the right side, right, you can see at the very top where Rehoboam is. And where is Josiah? All the way through all those kings way down there. So this prophet is coming to Jeroboam before Josiah is even born. And he's calling him out by name and saying what he's going to do. To me, that's just amazing, right? When they call people, not like these fuzzy prophets now, you know, you walk by the red balloon stuff, right? You walk by a flower and you're going to get money. Give me, you know, give me 1,000, you're going to get 10 times 1,000 blessings. Like, you know, crazy stuff that people are saying. These are people, true prophets, that are calling people by name before they're even born. Generate years later, decades later, before they're even born, they're already calling them out by name. So that's amazing to me, and saying what they're going to do. And then it says that this is the sign which Yahuwah, well, it says, and on you shall, I'm going back to verse 2, and on you he shall sacrifice the priests on the high places who burn incense on you, and human bodies shall be burned on you. Human bones shall be burned on you. Then he gave a sign the same day, saying, this is a sign Yahuwah has spoken. Behold, the altar shall be split apart, and the ashes which are on it shall be poured out. Right? So basically, Jeroboam's like, hey, go get him. His arm froze, and then the altar split. It's just, and ashes, just like the man said. So, you know, when prophets speak nowadays, well, we don't see this. Right? See this kind of stuff. That's how we know definitely is Yah. But that goes your spiritual discernment there, right? Some people just want to hear good stuff, so they'll go and give all their money and be broke because they gave their money to somebody who came that night and said they was a prophet, and then their family is suffering, you know, instead of trusting and asking Yah for discernment. And, you know, he will send whatever answer that he wants, right? But it says, then the king said to the man of Yah, please entreat Yahuwah, your El, and pray for me. So he basically got humble. After he saw all that stuff happen, his arm frozen, now he wants like, oh, help me, right? Like, and that's how we are as a people. When things start turning bad, we ready to, oh, help me, Yah, help us. But when things are going good in our life, we want to ignore him, right? And that's the danger of a lot of the stuff. And there's warnings in the Bible. This is biblical warnings, right? That he gave us as warnings for generations to come, but we still don't listen. And then when something bad happens, we want to blame, you know, a lot of people want to blame him. Oh, why'd you allow this to happen? But Yah is not going to be messing around with people. He does not mess around with people. And that's the thing about it is, you know, we want to save our family and those people, you know, get them to do what's right, but they got to choose to do what's right. You know, and when they don't, there's nothing we can do to save them when it comes between them and Yah. And even what's the Samuel and was it Eli? You know, Eli even said that about his sons. It's like, you know, what he said, Samuel, tell me what Yah told you. Tell me what he prophesied. And he said, you'll be cursed if you don't, or something, right? And Samuel told him, he was like, there's nothing I can do about my sons, right? Like, hey, you know, his judgment has been put out on them. He was more worried about the ark than he was about his sons because of the evil stuff that they had done, right? But we can see here, it says, verse 7, then the king said to come home. He tried to get the prophet to come to him, right? I will give you a reward. And the prophet was told not to go and told not to eat there, not to drink water. That's a very interesting story if you read that later. It's actually important too, because it's going to come back up later on in history, but I'm trying to focus just on the kings. But so this prophecy of Josiah was way up there, you know, in time. And then so, you know, once we get there, are you going to remember this? Are you going to remember this prophecy? Right? So this stuff is important when you're reading through the Bible, and a lot of people miss these type of stuff, right? These promises of something happening, and then later on it happening way down the line, but you got to keep track. Just like I said last week about the prophecy that Joshua said, right? About the person that will rebuild the city of Jericho, how, you know, the first son would die and the last son, something about the gates and stuff. And that thing went all the way through to the time of King Ahab, way after they already entered the land, hundreds and hundreds of years later. And it was the prophecy, the curse that he had spoken was actually fulfilled. So, you know, what about now with prophecies, right? So that's why I started off with prophecies. What's the prophecies that Yah spoke about our people way back then? And do you believe that they're going to occur or not, right? Way out in the future, are we looking in expectations for that? So I feel like that's why Yahusha said, when you see these things happen about wars and rumors of wars, and you know, don't get discouraged. Look up, for your redemption is coming. And how many of us are now looking for our redemption, or we get caught up in sports and basketball, and, you know, people talking about the Epstein letters, talking about the Knicks were going to win. And everybody like, look at the Knicks, they winning. It's like, okay, if you're going to believe that to that point, what about the Bible and how that's going to apply to our life? Now you should be like, oh, the basketball is fake, I'm gonna give it up, I'm going to study the Bible more. But no, it's just like WWF wrestling and everything else. People going to get caught up in the stuff that they for entertainment. Right, entertainment purposes, and that's why I think it's a weapon against our people. We get so caught up in the conspiracy theories and other things, and not in the Word of Yah to guide our life even forward where we already are today. All right, so next slide. So that is talking about what's going on, right, from Jeroboam, and then we know that Rehoboam was reigning, and we talked about him, I think 2 weeks ago. And we talked about how he was divided. He ran away from Jeroboam, you know, when he made some bad decisions, and then he was going to fight against Jeroboam, and Yah said, don't fight against your own people. And so he went back and he established, and then like the other people, all the Levites and stuff came to the southern kingdom to serve. It said for 3 years. Remember I said something about if you know anything about the 3 years and what the Levites, how long they stayed there. Did they ever go back to their land or not? You know, so that's one of those Bible studies that's be helpful to get other people's understanding. But then it talks about because, you know, Rehoboam became unfaithful to Yah. So he looks out like, you know, when he first started, he did something good, right? When he was trying to, you know, after he ran out, looked like he was trying to rebuild the kingdom, and the Levites came and favored him. But it then says, even in verse 1, he and all Israel with him forsook the law of Yahuwah, right? Forsook the law. The law is important, right? So in verse 5, it says, then Shemaiah, the prophet, came to Rehoboam. So why are all these prophets? I don't hear people talk about these prophets. You know, we talk about the prophets who have books named after them, but there was a lot of other prophets outside of those that have, you know, books named by them. So this Shemaiah the prophet, the last time it was an unnamed prophet, right, that told Jeroboam that Josiah was going to seem like his name would be mentioned. But, you know, it goes back to Yah is the one that we should be focused in on. But even these other prophets are going around Israel. That's why I always say, where is our prophets, right? A lot of people don't believe in the gifting and the ability of Yah, so they try to say, oh, we don't have prophets now because, you know, they come up with all kinds of excuses. Well, we don't have miracles now. You know, it's like, no, Yah's power, there's something off with us. There's still something off, right? He said that we want to have a body of, you know, we all part of his body. You're going to have a prophets. You're going to have those who speak, right? Be able to interpret tongues. I believe healing, miracle workers, teachers, you know, all this stuff is still needs to be, where's this in the body, right? Maybe not one person will have all these gifts, but we should have somebody out there with these gifts. But we'll hear even some of the times where people, just like during the time of Gideon, it says that they didn't even see a miracle, right? Because it seems like they weren't in tune with Yah. But anyway, so it says verse 6, verse 5. So Shemaiah came to Rehoboam and says, and then he says, you have, thus says Yahuwah, you have forsaken me, so I have also forsaken you to Shishak, right? So Shishak is the Egyptian king of Egypt that came against Jerusalem. And that's when Rehoboam humbled himself and he said, Yahuwah is righteous. He's like, hey, you're right, right? So that is also important, right? That's why I said we can learn from our kings, because even when we find ourselves in a place when we found out that we have gone astray, that our heart was prideful, that we thought about ourselves, there's a time that we can still repent and get back in favor with Yah. See, the northern tribe, they didn't repent. Jeroboam didn't repent for the things that he did. Right? But we can see here Rehoboam that took bad advice from his young counselors at first, right? His friends and stuff. And that's where you hear a lot of young people take advice from their friends instead of, you know, the older generations has been through the experiences and stuff, right? And they get caught up in something and then they try to get out, right? So we can see that even he did the same thing there, right? Instead of listening to wise counsel, he listened to bad counsel, got messed up, you know, him and a lot of people got messed up because of it. And now, you know, he's learning, at least at this time, he tried to learn from it and, you know, ask for forgiveness. He humbled himself. But then in verse 7 says, when Yahuwah saw that they humbled themselves, the word of Yahuwah came from Shemaiah, saying, they have humbled themselves, so I will not destroy them, but I will gather them some measures of deliverance, and my wrath shall not be poured out on Jerusalem by the means of Shishak. But they will become his slaves, so they may learn the difference between my servants and the service of the kingdoms of the countries. So we can talk about the transatlantic slave trade, right? Like, why did that occur? Why, you know, I felt like, hey, why are we cursed as a people? You know, I was to tears to that, trying to figure out why that, you know, being a Christian minister and trying to understand, hey, I'm a Christian. Why are we still getting treated by Trayvon Martin and all that stuff? What's going on with my people, right? What's going on with my people and my relationship with you, Yah, right? Like, there's something going on I knew was wrong, right? Something was off, right? But, you know, when we humble ourselves, that's the pattern. When we humble ourselves and give our hearts to him and truly seek him for what his word says, not what the world says, right? Not no psychologists and people of the world that's telling you, you know, all the doctors and professors and people, you know, is what the world is saying versus what Yah is saying. What is Yah trying to tell us, right? What is, he tells us even in Joel to take our children, the elders, to go and you know, humble ourselves and seek him. Pray, call out a fast, call out a prayer. Where are those things happening now, right? But it says, yeah, they become slaves. So why did the kingdom of Judah and West Africa become slaves, right? Because of the sin, right? That's who was kicked us out to West Africa, and from West Africa to America, and hopefully that he beat us, he allowed the world to beat us so bad that now we will return to him. But will we? Are we going to truly return our hearts, or there's going to be more persecution? Because he said, remember in Zechariah, he said he's going to be king, whether we like it or not. So what side of that are we going to be on, right? Are we going to be on the winning side with him and try to save our family and friends? Or are we going to be on the losing side, right? When we try to live the life that we can and feel in despair, and then, you know, our minds will go all out of whack because we're in despair. We can't live the life we want. We're more worried about the life we're going to live instead of living the life for him. Right? So that's why I think a lot of the mental illness is happening, because we're trying to have our image of life and we can see that come rumbling down, and now we don't know who to reach out to, right? We're just reaching and grasping. And instead of saying, hey, I know there's a plan that Yah has, I'm going to walk in that plan, and I know he's going to take care of me, whatever that plan is, step by step, day by day, that he's going to lead my life in a way that's going to glorify him, no matter if I lose my house or my car or all these things, that he's still going to take care of me, right? And it could be even better way, like, you know, as we talked about even in our Bible study, like Daniel and the Hebrew boys are standing up for who Yah is, and then they're getting moved up even in the place of their captivity, right? So we got to make sure we always glorify him. But we can see when the people humble themselves, they were still put in a bad situation. And then it says that King Shishak came and took all the gold and all the stuff from the people. And then verse 10, it says, then Rehoboam made shields of bronze in the place of the gold ones, and committed them to the care of the commanders of the guard who guarded the door of the king's house. So the southern kingdom's getting humbled, right? They're the ones that's basically guarding the temple now in Jerusalem. And now we can see that other nations are even taking and winning over them. So here we are complaining about what is going on in America or in different places, all throughout the four corners to our people. And, you know, we're more worried. We got to look, say, is this Yah's judgment on our people? And how do we get that judgment off of us is by, you know, confessing our sins and turning back and repenting as a people. And then it talks about in verse 12, and it says, then when he humbled himself, the anger of Yahuwah turned away from him so as not to destroy him completely. And also conditions were good in Judah. So he said, skipped over verse 13, verse 14, he did evil because he did not set his heart to seek Yahuwah. So when you don't seek Yahuwah, there are things that's going to cause problems, right? And Yah, you know, he is still king. He is still creator of heaven. He created all of us. He created everything. So we can't be in fighting rebellion to him and think he's going to bless us with something, right? He's going to have anger. He's going to have wrath. And that's one relationship I said is between you and Yah. There's nothing that anybody else can do to, intervene in your relationship. They can try to turn, they can try to talk, but you got to make their own decision to turn towards him. Nobody can force you to do that, right? So, and as we know in Deuteronomy 28, it talks about how that his curse will be on our people until we are wiped off the face of the earth, it says, until we turn to him, right? So we can see that these same things are going to continue to happen. It happened then, it's going to happen now, it's going to continue to happen also, all right? So next, so we remember also, I went back and talked about this because remember Rehoboam, his mom was Maacah, right? The Gershonite princess, right? Gershites were Canaanites. This is important to remember too. So I'm gonna keep on. You'll see this slide for a couple of times, but remember that the mother of Abijah, right? The son of Rehoboam, that was the mother as well, right? Because Absalom's mother was named Micah. He had a daughter named Micah, right? So that same Canaanite blood is still going through. And then Rehoboam married his daughter Micah, right? So that same Canaanite bloodline is also going mixed in with the bloodline of Judah, right? So now you have Abijah, who basically descends from a half Israelite, half Canaanite mother and Israelite father, right? And there was some mixtures even with them too, but I won't go through all that. So just remember that, right? And then Abijah is now ruling the kingdom because Rehoboam has now passed, all right? So keep track of that. So next slide. So it talks about how Abijah became king over Judah. And it says there in verse 2, he reigned 3 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Micaiah, right? It's changed the name. I don't know why sometimes the Bible does this, but it says the daughter of Uriel of Gibeah. Now there was a war between Abijah and Jeroboam. So who is this Micah? I thought Micah's father was what's his name? Absalom, right? So what's this talking about? Micah, the daughter of Uriel of Gibeah. What's that about, right? So also remember, sometimes, in Hebrew, the word daughter and son can mean granddaughter, grandson, right? As well. So, everybody has two grandparents, right? You got the father side and mother side. So a lot of people contribute that Micah, this is talking about not Absalom's side of Micah, but more in line to his other set of, the other set of grandparents, right? Of how she descended. So it also connects her back to this land of Gibeah. So just to bring that up. But this is now, there was war between Abijah and Jeroboam. So now in the side, remember Jeroboam is still the leader of the northern kingdom, right? So Rehoboam died before Jeroboam had died. All right. So now you have Abijah, his son, fighting against Jeroboam. So now we have this battle, right, fighting one another between our own people. And Abijah is now going to Jeroboam with all these men ready to fight. And remember, 10 of the tribes are in the north, and Abijah just got 2. She just got Judah and Benjamin, right? They're the only 2 that's there. Maybe some couple of Levites there too. And then he's standing there on this mountain, Jeremiah, which is in the hill country of Ephraim, and said, "Listen to me, Jeroboam and all Israel. Do you know that Yahuwah of Israel gave the rule over Israel forever to David and his sons by a covenant of salt?" A lot of people don't know what a salt covenant. Never even heard of that. I went to seminary when I was there, and that one semester, and I was talking to my Old Testament professor, and I said, "What's the covenant of salt?" He said, "I've never heard of that." I was like, "What? You speak Hebrew and all? You never seen the covenant?" He's like, "No." And once again, where I heard it the first time was at my wife's old Pentecostal Holiness Church, right? The black church, right? That people are like, "Oh, the black church." I hear some of those white professors like, what's his name? James White and stuff. He talks about the black church being ignorant and they don't really know what they're talking about. And, what they try to act like is the black ignorant, they knew about the covenant of salt and stuff. Where the professors at the white seminary didn't even know about the covenant of salt. So that's why I'm once again talking about, when I was talking about history, we can't just say, "Oh, the West Africans don't know what they're talking about in their oral language traditions. The white Europeans and Greeks and stuff knew more about West African history than West Africans knew," right? So we got to make sure that we don't get caught up on some of those bad way of looking at our own people. But, the covenant of salt was basically, salt preserved something, right? So there was a covenant given to King David, as a lot of us know, that was supposed to be forever, that somebody would sit on the throne of Israel from King David, right? So that's the reason why those 2 tribes were preserved when 10 tribes were given to Jeroboam, because of this salt covenant. And it's still, even to this day, right? There should be some line of King David and stuff like that. We know that Yahushua going to be the king at the end still. But, be interesting to even understand from the ruling of Zerubbabel, because isn't there a prophecy, a curse of Deuteronomy 28 talked about how your kings or your princes will be sent away or something, right? So be interesting to see how those kings also line up. But we can see that there was also a covenant of salt that was given to the Levites as well, right? So that Levites will always be before us, just like King David. And some people act like the Levites are not important no more, but they definitely are, as we can see the Limba tribe popping out of nowhere saying that they're the Levites and had the DNA and bloodline and traditions as well from the Buba clan. But yet it says, Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, the servant of Solomon, the son of David, rose up and rebelled against his master. And worthless men gathered about him, scoundrels who proved too strong for Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, when he was young and timid and could not hold his own against them. So now you intend to resist the king of Yahuwah, though the sons of David, being a great multitude, and having with you golden calves, which Jeroboam made for gods for you. Have you not driven out the priests of Yahuwah? So here it's still saying that the priests were driven out of the northern kingdom. And the sons of Aaron and Levites, and made for yourselves priests like the people of other lands. Whoever comes to consecrate himself with a young bull and 7 rams, even he may become a priest of what are no gods, right? So basically the same thing. Even during this time, Jeroboam's still around, right? And it said those 3 years, at least we answered some of our questions. When it came to Rehoboam, said the priest served him for 3 years, but we can still see that the priests have not been, even after those 3 years were not reinstituted or put back in place, that they're still out there. He's still out there selecting these random people to be priests over the children of the northern kingdom of Israel. But it says, but as for us, Yahuwah is our El, and we have not forsaken him. And the sons of Aaron are ministering to Yahuwah as priests, and the Levites attend to their work. Every morning and evening they burn to Yahuwah burnt offerings and fragrant offering incense, and the showbread is set on the clean table, and the golden lampstand, which is the lamps, is ready to light every evening. For we keep the charge of Yahuwah our El, and you have forsaken them. All right, next. Now behold, Yah is with us, and our heads and our priests, and with the signal of trumpets to sound the alarm against you, O sons of Israel. Do not fight against Yahuwah of your fathers, for you will not succeed. So Jeroboam thought he was smart, right? They basically said, hey, time to go to put the kingdom back in the right hands of the southern kingdom. And Jeroboam's like, oh, I set him up. I got an ambush for him, right? I'm going to get him, right? And then they basically ambushed him, right? And Judah was in a bad space because you got people attacking from your back and your front. And what did they do? They cried out to Yahuwah. And the priests blew them trumpets, right? So something about them, my wife said something about blowing that shofar. But that shofar was blown. It was like a cry out to Yah. And then it said basically they won the war, right? Even though they were outnumbered and basically set up in the right at a bad place, that Yah still allowed them to win the war, right? And they ran, Jeroboam away. But it says that it was Yah who did it, right? That Yah was the one that was giving Abijah and Judah the strength to do so. Right, so we can see that there was a great slaughter. 500,000 men was killed from the northern tribe, and the sons of Israel were subdued, and the sons of Judah conquered because what? They trusted in Yahuwah. So it goes back to us trusting, right? How much do we truly trust Yahuwah versus doing our own things, which we'll hear about some of the other kings that didn't do this or later on changed their mind. So we'll hear a little bit about that. But it says Jeroboam did not recover strength again, and Yahuwah struck him and he died, right? And then later on, it says, once again, in verse 22, it says, now the rest of the acts of Abijah and his ways and his words are written in the treaties of the prophet Edodo. Like, who's that? Like, where's this book? It said it was written. So, I think that's also a thing. They're talking about closing the canon, the Protestant canon. What if we find this book of the prophet Edodo? Or like some of the other ones, that we had mentioned earlier. What happens if we find, what is it, Shemaiah or something? Shemaiah, what happens if we find some stuff from him? So we got to make sure that we are at least aware of some of this stuff and what's the history around it as well. All right, so next. So it talks about how Abijah died, and then Asa became king in his place. And during his time, it says that the world was undisturbed. And basically, he did good in the sight of Yah. He had Judah to seek Yah of their fathers to observe the law of the commandments. He removed all the bad stuff, the high places, all the evil stuff, right? That was around, well, not all of it, but much of it. He built fortified cities. He did a lot of good stuff for Judah. And then he said to Judah, let us build these cities and surround them with walls. And so he built them up, gave them, strengthened them, and everything else. And he says, because we have sought Yahuwah, our El, we have sought him, and he has given us rest on every side. So, once again, if we want rest, how do you get rest? It's by trusting in Yah, right? Like, how do you want peace? How do we get out of our despair? It's by trusting in Yah, right? Seeking him, right? So next slide, it says, now Asa had an army of 300,000 from Judah, bearing large shields, spears, and 280,000 from Benjamin, bearing shields and spears. And Zahar, the Ethiopian, came out to fight against them with an army of 1,000,000 men and 300 chariots. He came to Marsah. And basically, Asa, the people came out to fight him. And then Asa called out to Yahuwah and said, Yahuwah, there is no one besides you to help in battle between the powerful and those who have no strength. So help us, O Yahuwah, our El, for we trust in you, and your name have come against this multitude. O Yahuwah, you are our El, let not man prevail against you. So Yahuwah routed the Ethiopians before Asa and before Judah. So they won the battle, right? He trusted in Yah. And that's also his downfall as well, as we will see. Because at this point, he trusted in Yah. He was like, hey, Yah, you're my power, you're my strength. You helped me to fight this major battle. We only had, 580 men against 1,000,000 men plus 300 chariots, and they won the war, right? And they pursued them, and they took all their plunder. And it said even the other nation says the dread of Yahuwah had fallen on them. Like, they were scared of Yahuwah because they saw what he did. It's just like when they came out of Egypt, and we start fighting those Canaanites, and Rahab was like, hey, we hear about what's happened. I'm going to hide these spies because I'm fearing your God, right? Like, there's something special about you. And so what is that about you, Judah? What's special about us as Judah spread across the four corners, right? Who are we? What about Israel, right? Even in the Africa and all the other places that they are spread out, what's special about them? Is because that we should say we Israelites and we got tradition and history and circumcision? Or is it based upon being obedient to the Yah that we serve, who has the power, who has the strength, who can give us rest, who can give us power and all the things that we want? This is that true battle of the heart that for our people right now. And next slide. So we can see later on, this, make sure I didn't skip something. Oh yeah, we good. So it says now with Asa, he made all these reforms, right? So it says the Spirit came on Azariah, the son of Oded, right? Who's Azariah, right? Nobody really talks much about these different prophets, but listen to me, Asa and all Judah and Benjamin. It says Yahuwah is with you when you are with him. And if you seek him, he will let you find him. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. Same story all throughout the Bible, even in today in your life, right? While you still doing right, he's with you. But as soon as you forsake him, so that's why I feel like, that's why I'm so cautious about the different groups of people and some of the stuff that they bringing in and some of the stuff. It's like, it was good when we were first, everybody was finding out we were Israel. Everybody was so happy and we was just ready to do, talking about the law and the bit or commandments and stuff. And now we kind of got kind of old with that. And now people start creating these doctrines and all this other stuff to basically fulfill their flesh. And he said he's with us when we're with him, when we seek him. But when we start to forsake him, he's going to forsake us. And that's why I'm worried about persecution happening. For in verse 3, so it says, for many days Israel was without the true Yah and without a teaching priest. The priests were supposed to teach, and without law. But in their distress, they turned to Yahuwah of Israel. They sought him, and he let them find him. The fact that we waking up as Israel is because he allowed us, right? That's what everybody talks about, 2015, 2014. I know there was people before that, but I'm talking about the majority of people were those when they start waking up. What made us to just snap like that to wake up to who we were all of a sudden, right? And all the information starts spreading and everybody start like, oh, we'll start searching the internet and all that, right? What was that awakening moment, right? He allowed us to find him, right? But now we have to seek him. And when we seek him and find him and do what he says do, then we're good. But he still got that same deal. When we start forsaking him, it's not going to matter, right? He's going to forsake us. And it's worse for our battle to be against him than those nations that's among us. Because he can give us the power to get the relief and the freedom that we truly need, right? But it says in those times there was no peace to him who went out or him who came in, for many disturbances afflicted all the inhabitants of the land. Nation was crushed by nation and city by city, for Yah troubled them with every kind of distress. But you be strong and do not lose courage, for there is reward for your work. So when, you know, the prophecy of Azariah, the son of Oded, spoke, he took courage and removed the abominable idols from all the land of Judah. I thought he already did that one time, but here we can see he's still removing stuff, right? And Benjamin from the cities which he had captured in the hill country of Ephraim. Then he restored the altar of Yahuwah, which was in front of the porch of Yahuwah. So when we start reinstituting those things, start getting that evil, you know, all that stuff around us, like we got so much evil stuff around us, it just don't make no sense, right? A lot of the art and the clothing and the jewelry, you know, we found like somebody had some witches jewelry they make now, right? You don't even know it's witches jewelry. But when we have that mind that's sold out for him, we want to, you know, this is kind of like, you know, having something, you know, like for our people, like having, you know, people that, well, we want to wear the Confederate flag. No, people like, I don't want to, they'll throw that stuff away, at least unless you're the sons of Confederate, and that's a whole nother story. But, you know, we don't want those images that we hate to be, you know, be around us, right? Even when we look at some of the people that have, you know, gone astray, right, and done stuff in our community, we were like, oh man, we know those bad signs that's against us, right? First, even like the fist, right? I remember when George Floyd and all that stuff, they were saying the Black Power fist, they were saying that was a Marxist. That's socialist. They said Marxist or socialism or something. Communism, that's what they said. It was a sign of don't do this fist. And even black churches were saying it. This is a sign, don't do that fist. It's a bad sign, right? And then as soon as, President Trump, when he was running, right, that bullet went by his head, or however you want to call it, and he stuck up that fist, and ever since then, that's been his sign, right? They took our sign away from us. Now it means something totally different for people, and we basically rejected who we were, and now people accept it for something that's good that has nothing to do with us. Like the rainbow, right? The rainbow was a sign that Yah would not flood the earth and had peace with man. And now it's been made a sign, the symbol of homosexuality. And now I even see the rainbow mixed in with the power fist, right? Like, what is going on, when it comes to all this? It's just the way that's polluting our people, right? Like, our signs are ours. The biblical signs is the Bible. We need to hold to those things and not accept all this other stuff that the world has manipulating our mind to receive. But he says that he gathered all Judah and Benjamin from those from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon who resided with them, for many defected to him from Israel when they saw Yahuwah his El was with them. So when we do right, other people are going to try to do right with us, right? That's how we can win over our people. It's not just saying, you're an Israelite, stop doing that pagan Christmas, right? Like, that's getting kind of old for people now. It's like, hey, I'm an Israelite and I'm going to live by the commandments. I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to live by the words of Yahusha. And you're going to see a difference in me that, people going to gravitate to that, right? That's what people should be gravitating to. Not just because you got all the garb and the dress and the nice head wrap or whatever. And they're like, oh, and then you doing all this stuff that's wrong. And you think people going to want to gravitate to that? Like, no. That's why he said we got to make sure that our conduct is right among the Gentiles, right? Because we're an ambassador of him, right? So next. So, so they assembled back and they basically entered the covenant to seek Yah with all their hearts and soul. And whoever would not seek Yahuwah should be put to death, they said. Whether small or great man. I'm not talking about putting nobody to death now. I'm not to that point. But they knew the issues with them turning their hearts astray and how it will affect all of them. Not just one or two of them, when Jeroboam committed that sin, it affected everybody, right? In your household, when somebody starts turning towards sin, it affects everybody, whether people like it or not, right? It's going to affect people even if that person moves out, it's still going to affect because you love that person, right? And then if they have children, now you messed up a whole nother generation, right? It's going to affect everybody. So they were even to a point, I'm gonna make sure people know I'm not for that, because I've even heard of somebody came from a camp said that the camp was talking about stoning people. So I'm definitely against that. I want to make sure that's out there. Don't do that, right? We're not Yah now, right? So, but he had mercy even on some of the worst kings. He can have mercy on anybody else. Let him have that judgment. But we can see here that they were that serious of not allowing sin to enter into the camp, that they had to seek him with all their heart and soul, right? And they basically, that's what was the difference between them and others, is that they actually did the things and not just talked about it, right? Not just being the people, but they actually lived as the people and not just looked like the people. And that's what we need to do, right? We need to seek him with all our heart and soul, and to stop just talking about all this stuff, Yah's name and all, that gets old, right? We can see that there was a lot of different languages in the Bible, even itself, that Manasseh and Ephraim even spoke a different Hebrew dialect than each other, and they were brothers. So we get caught up on all that stuff, pride, and not getting caught up on what Yah is telling us to do in this time, right? To seek him with his heart and do what he's called us to do, so he can actually raise us up to be the people that he wants us to be. And that's where we are, right? So, and for the whole world to see, not just us, for the whole world to see. Right, and then they made an oath, and they said don't make oaths, which I agree, because they ain't going to do what they say they're going to do. So, but anyway, we can see also a renewed covenant, right? So we can see how people say now that, that covenant that Israel had, they were wrong, they were evil people, and now Yah has rejected them, and now he made a new Israel. No, that's not how it worked, no. We can see when we read in Jeremiah 31, it says, because of the covenant with your fathers. So you got to have a father covenant And we the people who got their father's covenant, right? But they even renewing their covenant now. They renewed the covenant. They enter into the covenant, right? To seek Yahuwah. They already had a covenant. How do they enter into a new covenant, right? Or renewed covenant or new covenant. So it was all this new covenant that we kept on re-entering. We saw the same thing we said with Joshua. He entered into a new covenant when the people went astray to get them back in line. We'll see the same thing. What was it? Is it Hezekiah? Other people try to get us back into a covenant, right? But the new covenant says that Yah is going to basically say, I'm going to do this side of the covenant, right? It's going to be his covenant that he's going to establish, because we couldn't keep the covenant. But it's still the children of Israel. So that's why I said Jeremiah 31, he says he's going to make it with Israel and Judah, right? The northern and southern kingdom. But you got to understand all this history to understand that new covenant that he has basically fulfilled through Yahusha. That's not yet established. Well, it's been established, but it hasn't been fulfilled until he returns. So that's why I say you just can't look back at the cross. You got to look at back. You have to look ahead at his coming, at his future coming too. But it says in 15, they had sworn with the Judah rejoiced and restored with all their heart and had sought him earnestly and he let them find him. And then this is why I said it's important. What he said, he also removed Maacah. I don't know why they spelled it different. The mother of King Asa, from the position of queen mother, because she had made a horrid image as an Asherah. And Asa cut down her horrid image, crushed it, and burned it at the brook of Kidron. So the same Maacah, right, that we were talking about, that she's black and she's Canaanite and she's now mixed in with the blood, and we know, she's the same one that's still living, and she's basically leading them astray because, her history was being a Canaanite. So this same Canaanite history is going through the tribe of Judah, and we'll see it go through the tribe of Israel as well, right? So we'll see the same thing, because Jeroboam basically set them up, and now they're going sinning astray left to right because of some of the ancestor stuff. And we can see some of our people too, right? So next slide. We can see some of our people too do the same thing, right? We wake up as Israel. Now they want to figure out, which is great, want to find out how they connected to West Africa. And then next thing you know, they start in introducing some of the West African customs within our worship that y'all's like, hey, I kicked y'all people out because y'all were doing these pagan customs, these terrible customs, right? Idol worship and stuff. And that's the reason it sent us to West Africa. And then even after that, sent us through slavery even more, and then colonized them. And we want to go back to that worship, not to the one that he's telling us to do. And, as Israelites, we want to go back to pagan worship. But we see some Israelites, pulling in some of that stuff. And we should see that, get ready to see that same cycle go back a line over and over again, right? I thought some of that stuff too when we went to West Africa with Ronald Dalton and all them, went to Ghana. And there they was talking about praying with your ancestors. And I was like, wait a minute. At first I was like, okay, yeah, okay. And then they're talking about putting your face in some water. And then they were saying, pray to, I told my daughter, I said, do not pray. We're not praying to them ancestors. It's not who we need to be praying to. We need to be praying to Yah, not to ancestors, right? It's one thing to understand and recognize the history of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. You hear it even in the Bible. They always talk about fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They talk about the history, but you didn't hear them say, I'm going to pray to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You didn't hear that. So we got to be very careful with that. All right. So next, this starts getting towards the end of what we'll come to an end with today. But Asa's downfall. So he did all this good stuff, and let's hear what he did. And also remember, I said before, maybe I need to bring it up. I'll bring it up maybe at the end. But during the time of Asa, these are like the kings of Israel that I mentioned last week. All these kings are basically living, like 4 kings are being overthrown during the time of Asa. So Asa had a long reign where the kings of Israel, because of the evil and all that fighting, when we talked about how one of the kings walked into the house and the fire just let the fire fall, the house fall down on him and all that stuff from last week. All this time is during the time of Asa. All right. But we can see it says in the 36th year of Asa's reign. So he's 36 years in, where the other kings only had 2 years, 1 week, and all that other stuff. Reign Baasa, king of Israel. So now you see Baasa, king of Israel. This is the other king that we were talking about. Hold on, maybe I can change the slide real quick to show you some of that. Let me see. I don't know how to get out this view. Yeah, here we go. So let me see. I'm gonna uncrop this. I don't know if you're gonna see it when I uncrop it, but we'll see. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see you doing something.
Okay,
like that.
good. So let me take that. I'll create another slide. All right. Go back up here. Crop this one. All right. So go down one slide. Hopefully it saved it. All right. So this is one I just did. So you can see Asa on the right side. So we can see, let me do that real quick. Asa, and then we can see Baasa, right? So this is the time where I was talking about all these kings right here were the ones that lived a short time and were fighting each other. So we can see Jeroboam had Nadab, and then Baasa came and took over Nadab. I think Baasa was from Issachar, right? And then they start fighting. Then Baasa lost it. Well, his son reigned, and his son lost it to Zimri, and so forth, right? So we can see there was a lot of stuff that was happening during the time of King Asa, all right? Okay, so we can go back to the other slide. So we can see here where it talks about, let me see. So basically that the king of Judah was basically getting ready to come against Aram. Aram, you know, Aram was in Damascus, right? So we know that these are the Syrians, probably in this area. The Syrians are the cousins of the Israelites. So remember, Isaac was sent, a man was sent by Abraham to get Rebekah, right? Armenian basically took him, right? That was Syria. And then even, what's his name? Jacob, that he even went and got Rachel and Leah from Laban. That's the Syrians. So these were cousins, right? You can see more of this fighting among cousins. But it says, Asa brought out silver and gold and treasury of the household of Yahuwah and the kings of house, and sent them to Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, who lived in Damascus, saying, let there be a treaty between you and me, as between my father and your father. Behold, I have sent you silver and gold. Go break your treaty with Baasha, king of Israel, so that he will withdraw from me. So Baasha's beating down Asa. He tries to go, and Asa tried to go make a treaty with Aram of Syria, you can say. And, you know, after all that had happened before, right, that when he was fighting against, who was he fighting against? It was the Ethiopians, I believe, or Egyptians. He was fighting with, Ethiopians. So he was fighting against a million Ethiopians. He only had 500,000. He trusted in Yah. He won. But now he's trying to form treaties with pagan nations, right? Like, that's not good. You can see that even in our history a lot too. When we start making alliances is actually our downfall. And that's what happened during the Hasmonean, the Hanukkah time. You know, the Judas Maccabees and all them were beating down people. And as soon as they start making alliances with Rome and stuff like that, that was our downfall. But we can see here, we can see in verse 7, Hanani, the seer, another person I talk about a lot, came to Asa, king of Judah, and said to him, because you relied on the king of Aram and have not relied on Yahuwah, your El, therefore the army of the king of Aram has escaped out of your hands. So we know that, go to the next slide, we can see it says, were not the Ethiopians and the Lubim an immense army with very many chariots and horsemen, yet you relied on Yahuwah. He delivered you out of your hands. For the eyes of Yahuwah move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely hit. Goes back to the heart, right? You have acted foolishly in this. Indeed, from now on, you will surely have war. So we have wars even now, even within your own life. because now your heart is not completely with him. And then you think you're doing well, and all it just takes one day, and your whole life turns around. You know, people lost their job. I heard, you know, people losing their jobs again. They were IT professionals making six-figure salaries, and just one day, they were let go, and their whole life changed. Same thing with the when you know, the president start having the government shutdowns and stuff. Whole life, just in one day, changed, right? So are we going to trust in our alliances and our jobs and our own understanding and our own what we can do, or are we going to trust in Yah, right? So it says, for the eyes, so you have acted foolishness in this. Indeed, from now on, you will surely have wars. And it says, Asa was so mad with the seer, he put him in prison. Now he's attacking his own people that's supposed to sit by Yah. And that's how people do, right? You're like, I don't want to hear what you got to say, even though it's good for me. And you end up becoming the enemy of people you're trying to save, trying to help, right? And that's how it is, especially with leaders, right? A lot of times we try to help people. You know, there was one thing they told me, one of the pastors, when I was a Christian, told me, don't ever break up a fight between a married couple, because they're going to turn it on you, right? Like he said, call the police. And even some cops, I found out, they won't come to domestic violence because they're fearful of their life, because two people are fighting against each other. And, you know, one person's trying to, you know, is not, you know, sometimes a woman doesn't want to leave, but yet she's getting abused, and, you know, she has more connections to the man, still holding on to the man, and says sometimes they the ones getting even more violent. So we got to make sure we seek Yah in all things, and, you know, don't allow those that can misuse us or mistreat us and use us, you know, to their desires out of Yah's will to help take us down, right? So Asa, you know, Asa was mad, and he put put the seer in prison, and then he says he oppressed some of his own people at the same time. He was so mad because of what he did, right? It wasn't what the people did, it's what he did, that he gonna take his own anger, because now he's no longer in favor out on the people. Kind of like King Saul did with David, right? Like he knew King David, he was so mad at him that he would always repent. Oh, I'm sorry, you're better than me, King David. And then next thing you know, he up there trying to kill him again, right? But it says, you know, aren't this written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel? I don't know if that means, you know, the kings, first kings, second kings, or what is that? What book is that, right? But it says Asa became diseased in his feet at 39 years of his reign. He became diseased in his feet, right? So first it was 3 years later, he became diseased in his feet. His disease was severe, yet even in his disease, he did not seek Yahuwah, but the physicians. Now that's something, right? Like, where are we when it comes to that? It's one thing to, you know, go to the doctor. I think it's good to go to the doctor and stuff like that. But how much more are we seeking Yah for our healing versus seeking physicians, right? It's one thing to go to physicians, but how about with your prayer life, with the things of that nature, asking Yah for healing direction? Because I heard people that's been on medicine and all that, they come off the medicine, right? But then some people don't ever do, but Yah has it, you know, it's Yah's will. But how much do we seek Yah? You know, and I say that, you know, actually in concern for our people, because, you know, as the economy goes worse, as medicine gets, you know, how are you going to be able to afford medicine? Are we going to be able to, you know, we have to get to a point that we ask Yah, like, we're going to actually, like over in West Africa, they don't have all that stuff. That's where you see a lot of miracles and stuff, because they know Yah is all they got when they wake up to that, to him, right? They know that's all that they got. But now here we get so dependent on medicine, like, oh, just get some medicine, right? Like, that's our answer to everything. Not go pray and fast and let's seek Yah for the rest of our life, even if he doesn't, like the Hebrew boys, right? If he does deliver us, well, but if he doesn't, hey, I still trust in him, right? You know, we have those medicines and things to help us, but we know that usually those things are not the cure for what's going on. They just help the symptoms around it. But Yah, we know, is the healer. So we got to make sure that we continue to trust in him even through that. Okay, so next, and this is the last one I will go through today. I won't go through the whole thing though. Jehoshaphat, right, became king. So we can see here that we've been in 2 Chronicles, right? A lot of this has been talking about the southern kingdom, from one king to the other, where we know in the book of Kings, you know, went through all the different kings. So then, you know, just to let you know, the focus of the Bible is all focused on Yahusha, right? So that's why it's so important to, that it stays focused on the people of Israel. And then, well, even before that, Abraham and, all that. But it ends up being about Yahusha, right? That's why we believe in one testament, right? We don't believe in the Old and New Testament. It's one testament of Yahusha, how he basically atoned for our sins and how Yah called him forth in order to, redeem us. So that's what the focus of the Bible really is. Even in Torah, Tanakh, however you want to call it. That's why there's no kingdom. No temple now, right? Because he said he's the temple. He said, raise him up. So now we're talking about the king. The focus is a lot on the kings of Judah because we know that they're going to, outlast the king of the northern kingdom because Yah still had the salt covenant with the line of David because he's going to bring up the king, right? So it goes back to Zechariah 14. The king of the last days is going to be Yahusha on the Mount Olives. But we can see here that it says that Jehoshaphat became king, right? And he fortified the cities, set garrisons, land of Judah, and the cities of Ephraim, which Asa, his father, captured. So you can see that Judah actually took over some of Ephraim's territory there. We saw that last time with Asa. And Yahuwah was with Jehoshaphat because he followed the example of his father David's earlier days, and did not seek the Baals. So what's the Baals? Baals is the sun gods, right? So we can see sun worship even among us today. But sought Yah for his father, followed his commands, and did not act as Israel did. The northern, he sought Yah, and he didn't do what the northern kingdom. That's basically what it's talking about. So Yahuwah established a kingdom in his control, and all Judah brought tribute to Jehoshaphat, and he had great riches and honor. He took great pride in the ways of Yahuwah, and again removed the high places and the Ashram from Judah. So how did they come back if Asa removed them one time? You can see that stuff keeps on coming back again. He says again remove the high places. So so Asa must have been pretty mad and allowed a lot of that stuff to come back, or something had to happen, right? Or at least the people themselves decided to do it without his permission, but something happened. But then in the 3rd year of his reign, he sent his officials to teach the cities of Judah. So it goes back to teaching, right? Like I said, a lot of people don't want teaching. They just want conspiracy theories and, some of the entertainment stuff. But we got to understand the teaching of what Yah is trying to teach us, right? Because that's the fulfillment of what he's trying to do today, is truly understand what the word is trying to say so we can get in place, right? They taught in Judah, having the book of the law of Yah with them, and they went throughout all the cities of Judah and taught among the people. All right, let me see. Yeah, so this is actually when Jehoshaphat actually falls in alliance as well with Ahab. All right, so just want to set the stage, and this is why I'm ending here, because there's a lot to talk about next week about this. But next slide. So we know that King Ahab married Jezebel, once again a Canaanite. So she worshiped Baal, right? So this is what Ahab is doing during this time. He's worshiping Baal. He's allowing the Sidonians to actually influence them, making alliances. So he married the daughter of King Ethelbal, and now they're basically, he's running the northern kingdom, but he also is allowing a lot of the Baal worship to, take over. All right. So then next slide, we know they had a daughter, Athaliah. And as I said, Athaliah last week, she was the one that basically took over the kingdom, and she was the first queen of the nation of Israel. People don't talk about that, right? She's a queen of Judah, actually, because she's going to kill all the grandchildren that's supposed to be, except for one that was hid away, which we'll talk about next week. But you can see in that chart down below that basically Athaliah married Jeroboam, right? The son of Jehoshaphat. All right, so how did he marry him? What happened, right? How did they get that alliance? So most of the time when you have princes marrying somebody else's princess, there's an alliance that's basically being formed. So we'll talk about that next week. All right, next slide. Okay, so that's it. All right, so we got any questions? Nope. So hopefully that's helpful. And that's the reason why we're going through this, because it actually goes back to prophecy. How do you understand Zechariah 14, why Yah wants to be king when he assigned kings, right? He said the king not supposed to have many women. We know kings got a lot of women. They had a lot of women. Not supposed to have a lot of gold. They were giving them a lot of gold. They took a lot of gold. He said they want to take their land and all that other stuff, right? And now we're basically using those bad instances to even justify polygamy, saying, oh, the kings had a lot of wives, but Yah said they weren't supposed to have a lot of wives, right? We're not learning from what Yah want, his original intent. We're learning from the sins of our forefathers, right? And trying to incorporate some of that stuff back into what he was trying to weed out, right? As part of his progression, he was weeding out all that stuff, right? Somebody who's getting married to a half sister like Abraham, he said you can't do that no more, right? He allowed them to, even Moses, he allowed him to have she was a daughter of Abraham, the Midianite, but they call her Cushite. But, his brother and sister came against him because they're not supposed to wear foreign women. So later after that, so you couldn't marry if we had to marry somebody within your tribe, right? And then, we can even see now that how he was trying to get rid of even of polygamy, even in the New Testament. Somebody who was married only to one woman could be a bishop and stuff, right? So he was trying to weed that stuff out. So same thing with other things, that he's trying to make us that true set apart people. Set apart means you're not doing what everybody else is doing. You set apart, right? You're holy for his purpose and his use. And that's what he's doing to us now. All right, let us pray. Dear Yah, we just thank you for everything you've done for us. We ask you to help us to continue to remember to seek you with our whole heart. Help us to do what you want us to do in the way that you want us to do it. Help us not get caught up in the world and things of the world, and have our own mindset, but break us free from any spiritual attachments, any evil that's provoking us and leading us to our own destruction. Bless our generations to come. Help them not be influenced by the things that we have done in our life, and allow those evil influences to not only penetrate us, but penetrate our descendants. We ask you to help us to come out of that, to break us free from those spiritual strongholds, and allow us to seek you with all our whole being, our heart, our mind, our soul, all our might. And we know that this is what you so desire, is to love you first and to love our neighbors as ourselves, that you have things already set up for us if we truly believe and trust you as our mighty hand and our stretched out arm that's going to pull us out with wrath to establish us as your people and you as our king forever in Jerusalem. We ask you to forgive us of our own personal sin, even our own current struggles with drugs, of sexual of sexual desires that we have allowed overtake us, for lying and cheating and stealing from others, even if we killed others. As you forgive even some of the kings, you can forgive us if we confess up to that. And we know there's punishment for all these things, but our punishment for those things are more important for us to receive you than us to worry about what we have to face because of our own sins. And it's just like here with transatlantic slave trade and the things that we've been through, we are sorry for our sins, and we know that you will redeem us, rather if it's our generation or the generations to come or future generation, as we seek you and turn back to you. So we ask you to allow that to happen, even in this time of Juneteenth and stuff of celebrating a false freedom that we truly don't have. That was just done for the wickedness of others to trying to keep themselves together, and not for the betterment of our people. But, we ask you to let us be set on true freedom, which is through your son, through Yahushua, from our sins, from bondage, from what was put on us from past generations, so we can be set again as your people, your Memleket Kohanim, your royal priesthood, your kingdom of priests. We love you, we praise you, and we ask you to just continue to be with those that are healing, those that have issues with family members and, funerals and things, people passing away. Ask you to heal them as well. Heal us from any wrong doing that was done to us when we didn't have a choice. We ask you to help people to heal from that as well, and those that's caught up in situations that's hard to get out, we ask you to bless them with freedom as well, and help us to endure unto the end, and to give your name the glory, honor, and praise, to share the testimonies of deliverance to generations to come. In Yahushua's name, we just thank you for victory through your son, Yahushua. We do pray. Hallelujah. Amen.